We're live streaming. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, council, staff, and also those listening at home. My name is Ben Kunza, and I'm the Deputy Mayor of the City of Canning, and I'll be chairing the meeting tonight in the absence of Mayor Hall. The ordinary council meeting has been held by electronic means in accordance with Regulation 14 of the Local Government Administration Regulations 1996, and owing to the current state of emergency and public health state of emergency in response to the pandemic caused by COVID-19 declared on the 15th of March 2020. I declare this ordinary council meeting of 21 June 2022 open at 6:05, just a few minutes behind schedule. We start by acknowledging the Whadjuk people, the traditional custodians of the land. We also pay our respect to elders, both past and present. I ask everyone to make sure that your mobile phones are turned off or on silent for the duration of this meeting. And as you know, the meeting is being live streamed via the city's YouTube channel. Whilst electronic meetings are in progress, elected members are reminded to ensure that when they leave, their camera make sure your cameras are turned on at all times. And if you're required to turn your camera off or wish to leave the meeting for a short time, please notify me in absence, just so that governance is aware. I just also want to reiterate that when we get to voting, that voting will be simultaneously. So when I ask you to vote, you either show your for or against card, and that will be how the vote is taken. Council meetings are public meetings, and any information you provide shall be recorded and may be publicly accessible. The council chambers are not a parliament, and parliamentary privilege does not apply. Elected members and staff risk being held personally liable if their comments are defamatory or breach any duty of confidentiality. Statements made during council meetings are solely those of the person making them. Nothing expressed at a council meeting can be attributed to the city unless it is adopted by a resolution of council. The confirmed minutes of a council meeting are the official record of that council meeting. Verbatim minutes are not required. Nevertheless, the city publishes a recording of the meeting. Recording of council meetings must not be copied, republished, or reproduced without the city's express permission. Attendance, I have 3 apologies. I'll just go through the vote, and can you please let me know whether you're in attendance or not. Mayor Hall is an apology. Deputy Mayor Kunza, I am present. Councillor Bain, are you present?
Yep, present, Deputy Mayor.
Councillor Holland, are you present?
Present.
Councillor Jacobs, are you present?
I'm present, DM.
Councillor Parkinson is unfortunately an apology is taken with illness. Councillor Sabiri, are you present?
Present.
Councillor Singh, are you present?
Present, Deputy Mayor.
Councillor Spencer Teo?
Yes, present.
Councillor Sweeney?
Present.
And Councillor Tuchek?
Present, Deputy Mayor.
The CEO is also an apology. Director Kane will be acting CEO in his stead for this meeting. Approved leave of absence, there are none. Disclosures of interest. I'll now ask the Director of Canning Corporate and Commercial, Stephen Kane, to advise of disclosures received.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And tonight we have one declaration of interest for an impartiality from Councillor Bain in item CD 012 of 22. The interest being that the council lives in the street that's part of that particular heritage item. We have 2 declarations.
Just to confirm, Director, that was financial, not impartial.
Sorry, I thought I said financial, but it's my mistake if I did. We have 2 declarations of impartiality. The first from Councillor Spencer Teo in item EN 012-22. The adjourned item, multi-year projects, and the nature of the impartiality is that the councillor is a member of the CPTC on the grounds of which one of the items referred to in the report. The second declaration is from Councillor Singh in item C0005-22, which is the adjourned motion from the AGM, and the councillor has noted that he's voted in favour of the motion at the AGM.
Thank you, Director Kane. Move on to announcement by the presiding member.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor.
Sorry,
just to add to my declaration of impartiality, I believe that detail got missed out. The motion was moved by AGM by a family member of mine, who is also a ratepayer of City of Canning. Associate Professor Pravinder Kaur is my sister.
I've got that in the run sheet, so it's been stipulated. Is that correct, Karen?
Right.
Yeah, that's all good. Thank you, Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Move on to announcement by the presiding member without discussion. I just have a few comments to make. I just want to, since our May Ordinary Council meeting, we've had a few events that I think we need to recognise. The first being on behalf of the City of Canning and our community, I just wanted to start by recognising and congratulating Her Majesty, the Queen Elizabeth II, for her 70 years on the throne, and thank her for her dedication to public service. I know you're not actually in the chambers right now, but to my right is actually a portrait of the Queen that we always look at, and I think we need to recognise it. So much has changed over this period, but the Queen has remained a constant. And so to honour the Jubilee celebrations, the city actually illuminated the Old Town Hall and the Wharf Street Basin purple, and our way of saying thank you to Her Majesty. I also just want to note that since our May Ordinary Council meeting, we've had a federal government election, which resulted in quite a bit of change. Notably, the former member for Tangney, Ben Morton, lost his seat. And I just want to take this opportunity on behalf of the City of Canning and its community to genuinely thank Ben and his team for his work in the community over the past 6 years. Ben was centrally involved in a number of local Canning projects, but I just wanted to highlight his contribution to the expansion of the Willetton Basketball Stadium that will forever be remembered. With many commitments being made during federal election campaigns. Some people won't know that as recent as 2016, when he was first elected, it was somewhat uncommon for the federal government to directly fund community infrastructure projects. And whilst the Willetton Basketball Stadium was previously pursuing the National Stronger Regions funds, changes in the eligibility for that fund meant that the association was unsure where it'd go to try and attract the many millions required, but enter Ben Morton. He was influential in lobbying and inevitably secured the $5.5 million from the federal government and made sure the state government couldn't ignore the project. And as we all know, the expansion became a reality, and that was in no small part to Ben's contribution, but also the contribution of his office and his staff, Jordan, Nick, Helen, Sean, Nicole and Harry, and I just want to wish them all the best. I also want to thank the former member for Swan, Steve Irons, for his many years working for the people of Swan. Mr. Irons' exit was not a surprise, as he announced his retirement long before the election, but we acknowledge his contribution on behalf of the community and say thank you. But we also want to welcome and congratulate Zenetha Mazakaranthis for being elected as the member for Swan, Sam Lim for being elected as the member for Tangney to represent the community in the House of Reps, but also congratulate Burt MP Matt Keir for being re-elected again. Well done on your respective campaigns. We look forward to working with you as a council to deliver great outcomes for the City of Canning community. And we've got some key projects that received federal commitments towards, so it's very much welcome. Lastly, I just wanted to spend a moment to mention a local story that highlights the hard work that our very own City of Canning staff do. Over the summer, when we had many grueling hot days, when the temperature hit the mid-40s on consecutive days, local residents on the Canning River noticed an very old, mature chewit tree on the Canning River that was really struggling and had dropped all its leaves. Well, our Canning staff, if you're unaware, literally brought this back to life. I won't go into all the detail, but after commissioning our arboricultural assessment, the city's park staff commenced drenching the tree's roots and surrounding soil with 5,000 litres of water, seaweed extract and organic wetter twice a week for 3 to 4 weeks. Further works then followed. The reason I'm raising this is the tree ultimately came back to life and is now thriving again, thanks to the dedication from City of Canning staff. And I think it's a great illustration of how far we've come as a local government and how serious we are about protecting mature trees and creating a better environment. So at a formal council meeting, I just want to take a moment to congratulate and thank Director Bo's team, especially Nick Rayner, Matt Emney, Tom Daly and Charlie Firth. Director Bo, please pass on our appreciation. We move on to report of delegates without discussion. Do any elected members wish to present a delegate report? No? All right, we move on to question time from the public. Responses to previous questions taken on notice, there are none. Questions from the public. I open question time at 6:14 p.m. The time set aside for public questions is 15 minutes, which may be extended if necessary. If an answer cannot be provided at tonight's meeting, the questions will be taken on notice and an answer will be provided at the next ordinary council meeting. As this meeting is being held by electronic means, the public has been advised via the city's website to submit questions in writing. Questions received will be read aloud and responses given. The city has received questions for tonight's meetings from Mr. D. Van der May, Ms. Dixon, Ms. Sarkar, Ms. Webster, and Mr. Sankit. I'll request Director Bowe to please respond to the questions from Mr. Van der May.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you for the acknowledgement of staff previously. It is greatly appreciated by all of the operational staff to be recognised by the acting Deputy Mayor at this particular time. We have a number of questions. The first question is from Mr. D. Van der May of Station Street in East Cannington, who asks, why did Gibbs Street need to be narrowed? Could something else be done instead of those ugly ramps installed? The response is the Gibbs Street Safe Active Street is a project endorsed by the City of Canning through its cycling and walking plan. The Safe Active Street forms a key active transport linkage between the State Football Centre, Manana Park, Queen's Park Open Space, Gibbs Street Primary School and the Cannington train station and the city centre. When endorsing the project, Council considered feedback from the engagement activity, What Gibbs? Feedback from 107 survey responses was collated and the opportunities to improve the street focused on 4 key areas, including creating a quieter street by reducing vehicle speeds through traffic calming, improving street connections through improved pedestrian connections and on-street parking, green the street with more tree planting and improved landscaping, and to create a welcoming street with enhanced lighting, artwork and places for neighbours to gather. The project team considered various forms of local traffic management installations to meet the requirements of the community obtained through the feedback and the broader objectives of the Safe Active Street and its intended purposes.
Director Bowe, could you please respond to the question from Ms. Dixon?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Ms. J. Dixon of Tulip Way, East Cannington asks, why has Gibbs Street been altered to create a traffic and safety issue? I would refer to my previous response insofar as the works undertaken on Gibbs Street. I would also add that Gibbs Street will have a speed limit of 30 kilometres per hour. The design and implementation of local traffic management installations are deemed to be safe and do not create a traffic issue when the road is used for its intended purpose. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Director Bowe. Director Kane, are you able to respond to Mr. Sarkar of Gibbs Street, please?
Thank you. And yes, Deputy Mayor, the first question is, can the council email ratepayers when they ask for submissions, feedback, input on any matter? For example, the recent submission on rate rises, as many people do not visit the website regularly to take notice of such initiatives. The response: to advertise key information, the city publishes media releases, provides information on its website, responds to questions from the media for publication in our local newspapers, and uses the ORSAID page to solicit community feedback. This has ensured wide coverage of important matters. The city does not have a detailed list of email addresses for all residents, and not every resident has an email account, and nor do all residents prefer to provide those or disclose those to us. The ORSAID software consolidates all submissions into a report format, ensuring we have a single point of contact to capture such comments. Question 2. Given the council's recent financial woes, can we consider an independent external audit of the council's finances to ensure the council is running efficiently? The response: in May 2021, as part of developing a plan to address the city's financial position, the city engaged More Australia Proprietary Limited, an accounting firm with specific expertise in the local government sector, to independently assess the data and modelling used in that report. The More Australia report was attached to the council report and did confirm that the recommended actions in the report would achieve the outcomes proposed. These principles were then embedded in the city's long-term financial plan adopted by council in February 22.
Thank you, Director Kane. Director Bowe, are you able to answer question 3, please?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Ms Sarker from Gibb Street, East Cannington also asks, many Gibb Street residents feel that the recent roadworks and proposed changes are making the street worse off. Is there a pathway to stop and reverse now, or do we just have to put up with it? The response is the city has almost completed the Gibb Street Safe Active Street project. Final works include footpath connections, street tree planting and signage and line marking. Prior to the conclusion of the project, a road safety audit will be undertaken to ensure the built environment is aligned with the design intent and does not present hazards within the road network. The project was the subject of a targeted community engagement activity called What Gives. The project was endorsed as part of the city's walking and cycling plan and was subject to further consideration and endorsement by council at the ordinary council meeting of December 2021.
Thank you, Director Bowe. Next question is from Ms Webster. Are you able to provide answers to her questions? Thank you.
Yes, I can, Mr Mayor. Mr Deputy Mayor. Ms Webster did not provide an address and she provided a submission. However, we've discerned a particular question out of that submission, being the question was directed to council making the decision on the kangaroos' fate near Canning Vale's waste transfer station. Instead of culling or removing the kangaroos from their site, why can't the kangaroos remain on their bush forever land and have this area fenced? The answer is the existing population of kangaroos is estimated between 250 and 300 and is too large to be sustained on the available land. The Department of Biodiversity, Conservation and Attractions, DBCA, estimates that a sustainable population equates to less than 1 animal per 10 hectares, allowing both the kangaroos and the native vegetation to survive without degradation of the condition of the vegetation or animal welfare issues occurring for the kangaroos. A decision has not been made on the best approach to manage the kangaroo population. If the kangaroos are fenced into an area that is too small for them to exist sustainably, this will result in animal welfare issues for the kangaroo and the degradation of the natural flora. The Banksia woodlands on the Swan Coastal Plains is a threatened ecological community and is protected under state and federal legislation. A large population of kangaroos on this land would lead to degradation of the flora therein. The existing population of the kangaroos is too large to be sustainable on this land. In regards to the comment that the recent Examiner paper stated the city wanted kangaroos to be culled to make way for the Canning Vale Regional Sports Complex, I can confirm that this statement is incorrect.
Director Bowe, can I also ask you to answer the questions from Mr Sandkit, please?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Mr Sandkit's first question. A few months ago, I raised a ticket with the City of Canning with regards to a speeding issue on Gerrard Street, East Cannington. The ticket was ignored and there has been no progress made. A proposal could be to add a couple of slow points on Gerrard Street from Gibb Street from Gibb Street School towards Elizabeth Street. If it is too expensive, could the city install speed bumps like we have on Mallard Way? The response is the staff will reach out to Mr Sandkit for further information on the reference numbers for the tickets that he referenced and will be happy to investigate the status of these matters. In the interim, staff provide the following general comments regarding Gerrard Street. This road segment contains a slow point already approximately 250 metres beyond the Gibb Street school boundary towards Elizabeth Street. When traffic data was last acquired for this road segment in 2019, the 85th percentile of the operating speed of the road was 58 kilometres with traffic volume 58 kilometres per hour with traffic volumes of 2,150 vehicles per day. These are deemed to be within the expected operational parameters for the district distributor B road, which is Gerrard Street. Following the completion of the Gibb Street Safe Active Street project, the city will acquire further traffic data from the local area to check for changes in traffic patterns, and in the event that interventions are warranted, these will be undertaken in accordance with budget and other constraints. The second question from Mr Sandkit is, Streetlights on Gerard Street are not effective. Many among our neighbourhood have raised several tickets on the same issue but failed to receive a response. There should be lights installed on the footpath. The other side of Gerard Street, which is from Illingway to Elizabeth Street, is way too dark and not safe for women or children or even walking dogs in the evening or night. Can the city install lights as the infrastructure is there already? The response is, with regards to street lighting, these issues are more appropriately raised with the asset owner, Western Power. Although staff do periodically undertake street lighting audits and refer faults and the like to Western Power directly, similarly to the first response, staff will reach out to Mr. Sandkit and get some more information regarding the tickets that he references being raised through the city's customer relationship management system. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Director Bowe, and also Director Kane. As there are no further questions from the members of the public, I now close question time at 6:25. Moving on, confirmation of minutes. The ordinary council meeting held on 17th of May 2022. The recommendation is on page 3 of the agenda. The recommendation is on screen now. Can I please have a mover? Sorry, I'll just wait for you to get on the screen. Sorry, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Bain. Seconder, Councillor Jacobs. Councillor Bain, anything to add?
Nothing to add, Deputy Mayor.
Councillor Jacobs.
I support this motion and have nothing to add.
Anyone have any comments? All right, I'll put this to the vote. All those in favour? Sorry, sorry. Please put your voting cards up on the screen.
I can confirm that the motion to confirm the ordinary council meeting minutes of May 2022 have been carried unanimously.
Thank you, Karen. Moving on. Item 8, receiving of petitions, presentations and deputations. 8.1, petitions, there are none. 8.2, presentations, there are none. 8.3, deputations. A deputation has been approved for Mr. Richard Aldridge, titled Land Utilisation Plan, an alternative to selling civic property, Riverton Arts Precinct. I will now ask the Director of Canning Corporate and Commercial to read aloud the deputation.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. From Mr. Aldridge, the land utilisation is a cornerstone to the primary objective of the City of Canning being a welcoming and thriving city. The Council must think beyond its immediate current financial crisis and into the future when determining what properties should be retained for future use or disposed of. The Canning Arts Centre block of land opposite Riverton Stockland Shopping Centre is ideally located for a future arts precinct or alternate major community use. The land is currently zoned for civic use. It is earmarked for community purposes and if disposed of will be impossible to replace in the future. I realise that plans for an art precinct or of other civic use may not be achievable for decades due to the city's finances, but retaining this land for future civic use as opposed to selling it for the quick revenue injection needs to start now. Spending $50,000 on a consultant to investigate the most optimal outcome for site disposal before the council has considered whether this irreplaceable civic space should be sold or retained is premature. City plans to sell civic zoned property should go out to community consultation because it is land zoned for community purpose. Consultants briefed to prepare a report for the optimal way of disposing of property are unlikely to consider the site's potential future social and mental health benefits. Consideration as to whether this property has future social value or should be disposed must be the consideration of council and not a foregone conclusion of the administration. This consideration must take priority to spending ratepayer money on consultants to work out how to optimally dispose of the property. The future of this irreplaceable civic space must be a decision of the people's representatives. The administration has already proposed a $6 million plan to move the Canning Arts Centre to the Leisureplex Library. This move appears to be an attempt to make the block unused and underutilised. The issue with the Riverton Leisureplex Arts Centre proposal, besides the price tag, is that it appears to be a proposed display space and not a creative workshop. Some residents need creative expression and spaces to achieve them in order to live a more balanced, mentally healthy life. Creative expression is good for your soul. It is an opportunity to act, belong and commit. The Canning Arts Group is over 50 years old and, just like a sports facility, has been enriching the lives of participants. The Canning Arts Centre site in future could be the home of other creative groups like the Men's Shed and visual and performing artists. The future of this site needs to be considered prior to engaging a $50,000 consultant to tell you how to best to sell it. The Canning Arts Group does not cost a lot to maintain, especially compared to the $6 million move. Is now the right time to pay $50,000 to a consultant to optimise how to sell this community purpose civic property? That is the end of the deputation.
Thank you, Director Kane. Just given the deputation relates to an item that Council considered this evening, I just want to follow up and ask a question of Director Bride, as I believe it's important that the arguments and statements made are factual. Director Bride, I note that Mr Aldridge repetitively stated in his deputation that the relevant land where the Canning Arts Group is located is zoned for civic use and is earmarked for community purpose. In fact, it was the entire basis for the deputation. Can you please clarify on the zoning for the site, please?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, the site is actually zoned district centre, so it has a commercial zoning with an R coding of R40. So that allows for a whole range of commercial and community uses for council to consider into the future.
Thank you, Director Bride. Moving on, applications for leave of absence. There are none. Questions by members of which due notice has been given without discussion. Councillor Holland has submitted 6 questions, which can be seen on page 4 in the agenda. I'll ask the Director of Canning Corporate and Commercial to provide the responses.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. A response was provided to Councillor Holland in writing that answered the questions of how many staff are employed in the city, how many staff received redundancies in the past 2 years, the role changes were involved in those changes, how many staff resigned in the last 2 years, data on casual turnover, on temporary staff, and how many staff contracted COVID, as well as information on the financial associated elements of these. A copy of the responses provided to Councillor Holland will be published in the minutes.
Thank you, Director Kane.
Excuse me. Excuse me.
Yes, Councillor Holland.
I haven't received anything.
Director Kane.
I'll go back and confirm, but I certainly know that an email was sent. And
an email was sent that I was going to get them, but I haven't received the actual responses.
All right. Well, I'll double check that, but it was certainly our record show it was sent. And if it hasn't got to you for some reason, but I'll do a due diligence check through the city's IT system. Could
you also tell me how that I asked these to be on notice? Why aren't the answers given on notice in this meeting? That was that was what I wanted. I wanted these answers given now.
Director
verbally.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. You're aware, of course, this is a section where the questions are asked as on notice, and there's no debate on any of the matters. Yep. I simply note there should be no further discussion on the response. I could amplify that the data contains data in tabulated format, and it would be impossible to read that out.
Yeah, so there's quite a bit of information, Councillor Holland, and it will be included within the minutes of the agenda, which will be provided in due course. Moving on, point 11, items brought forward for the convenience of those in the public gallery. There are none. Moving on to reports of committee meetings, item 12.1, a report of Audit and Risk Committee held on the 1st of June 2022. The recommendation is on page 5 of the agenda and is on screen now. All right, thank you. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Bain. Can I please have a seconder? I'll second it. Councillor Bain, anything to add?
I support the committee's recommendation, Deputy Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bain. Likewise, I have nothing to add. Does anyone have any comment to make? All right. Nothing to rebut, Councillor Bain. I'll now put it to the vote. Can you please now show your voting cards? Councillors, can we please try to be as simultaneous as possible?
The motion motion 12.1 for the Audit and Risk Committee has been carried unanimously with all 9 in favour.
Thank you. Moving on to item 12.2, report of CEO Performance Review Committee held on the 16th of June 2022. The recommendation is on page 8 of the agenda and is on screen now. An absolute majority vote is required for this item. Okay, Stacey. Can I please have a mover for the item? Councillor Singh? Can I please have a seconder? Councillor Spencer Teo? Councillor Singh?
I agree with the officer recommendation and nothing to add, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Councillor Spencer Teo?
Nothing to add either. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer Teo. Anyone else would like to speak against the officer recommendation or for the officer recommendation? All right, with nothing to rebut, Councillor Singh, I'll now put it to the vote. Can you please show me your voting cards?
Councillor Holland. Thank you. Motion for the report for the CEO Performance Review Committee has been carried unanimously with 9 in favour.
Thank you, councillors. Moving on to item 13, reports, the Office of the CEO. The first item.
Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, can I just make a comment, please, just for a second before you go on?
You can, Councillor Sweeney. Have you got a question?
Well, I'd just like to make a comment that I'm having difficulty hearing what you're saying. I don't know whether any other councillor is having difficulties with the sound, the volume, but I'm certainly having some difficulty. It's breaking up and it's quite low, the volume.
Is anyone else having any difficulty? I'm not sure what the issue is, Councillor Sweeney, I'm sorry. There's no one else seems to have any issues.
Okay, I'll battle on. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Councillor Sweeney. If there's anything you missed, please bring it to my attention. Office of the CEO, the recommendation is on page 15 of the agenda and is on screen now. An absolute majority is required for this item. Thanks, Stacey. Can I please have a mover for this item? Councillor Sabiri. Can I please have a seconder? Councillor Spencer Teo. Councillor Sabiri, would you like anything to add?
No, I support the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sabiri. Councillor Spencer Teo.
I too support the recommendation. I have nothing to add. Thanks, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Spencer Teo. Anyone wish to speak on the item? All right, we'll, with nothing to rebut, we'll put it to the vote. Please show me your voting card.
Confirm motion CC-002-22 is being carried by absolute majority with all 9 in favour.
Wonderful. Moving on to 13.2, the monthly financial report in the Directorate of Canning Corporate and Commercial. The recommendation is on page 23 of the agenda and is on screen now. Thank you, Stacey. Can I please have a mover? Councillor Spencer Teo. Can I please have a seconder? Councillor Bain. Councillor Spencer Teo, have you got anything to add?
No, I support the officer recommendation. Thanks, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Bain.
I support the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone wish to speak on the item? Councillor Holland?
Yes, because I hadn't received things in paper form at the AB, I hadn't had a chance to ask some questions on that. It seems that we still have, the question is, I was hoping that we would have reduced our temporary staff, but we're still $250,000 on temporary staff per month. Can we see any timeline that could be coming down, please?
Director Kane?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through the Chair. Councillor Holland, no, not in the immediate future. The staffing situation across the state, with an unemployment rate of only 2.9% in the state, it presents us with the trouble of, or the challenge of trying to fill many positions and the longer lead time. I was reviewing another local government's financial statements tonight, and they report exactly the same challenges as we do.
Are they spending the same amount of money as we're doing?
Their total spend was in the millions. They have much bigger workforce than we do. It was far more significant.
Where was that?
Councillor Holland, do you have any further questions?
Yes, I do. Where was that, Director Kane?
If you read the City of Swan's current financial statements, that were published for their 1st of June meeting, you'll see references there to the total underspend on salaries and wages.
Could you please,
Councillor Holland?
Yeah, could you please explain what the Australian Institute of Management's $35,000 was for?
Director Kane?
Thank you. We'll take that question on notice, but I know we have a number of contracts, particularly for training with the Institute of Management. If you've got a particular warrant listing, I'd need to verify which particular transaction that was for.
Councillor Holland, do you have the warrant listing?
044346.
Thank you. You'll get back to him, Director Kane?
Absolutely, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Holland, any further questions?
The $6,500 for the Committee of Perth.
Director Kane?
Again, as no questions raised, I'm happy to take any of these on notice, Deputy Mayor. If you could give us the warrant listing.
Councillor Holland?
044788.
Any further questions, Councillor Holland?
Yeah, Grow It, local membership.
Do you have our warrant listing number?
Yes, 044218.
Thank you. Anything further?
Women's leadership, 15,400, 044434.
Just get going with your warrant listing.
The City of Coburn, 774,000. I haven't got the warrant listing one on that.
I'm sure Director Kane would like to answer that one.
Yeah, the City of Coburn.
Director Kane will be able to answer that.
Through the Chair, Deputy Mayor, the City of Coburn's contribution relates to disposal of our waste at their landfill.
Councillor Holland?
Sorry? Pardon?
It's the disposal of waste at landfill. We have a contract with it.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further, Councillor Holland?
No.
Any further questions, or anyone like to speak on the item, elected members? Councillor Sweeney?
Yes, thank you. Just going on from Councillor Holland, I just have one area that I'd like to get some feedback on, and that
Go ahead.
Under insurance services, RAC business wise, for the amount of $99, the number is 044780.
You got that, Director Kane?
I have. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Anything further, Councillor Sweeney?
No, thank you.
No worries. Anyone else? Councillor Jacobs, are you still with us? All right. Nothing to rebut. Councillor Spencer-Teo will now put this to the vote. Can you please show me your voting cards?
A motion CC-023-22 has been carried unanimously with all 9 in favour.
Thank you. Moving on to CC 02422, proposed road dedication lot 50 Albany Highway, Cannington. The recommendation is on page 61 of the agenda and is on screen now. Thanks, Stacey. Can I please have a mover? Councillor Spencer-Teo. Any seconder? Councillor Sabiri. Councillor Spencer-Teo.
I support the officer's recommendation and have nothing to say. Thanks, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Sabiri, anything to add?
Nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions or would like to speak on the item? All right, I'll put it to the vote. Can you please show me your voting cards?
Motion CC-024-22 has been carried unanimously, 9 in favour.
Thank you. Moving on to CC 02522, the Land Utilisation Plan 2020-2025 minor review. The recommendation is on page 68 of the agenda and is on screen now. Although I understand that Councillor Sabiri would like to move an alternate motion. Councillor Sabiri, can you please, do we have that on screen, governance? So Councillor Sabiri, you're moving that?
Yes, please.
Do I have a seconder? Sorry. We'll bring it back if need be. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bain? Councillor Sabiri, do you want to talk to the to your alternate motion?
Basically, I just would like to have more information about that item. It's a big decision to include it in our assets, on our assets list, and I feel that we don't have enough information. I'm not saying let's not put this on the list, but we need and deserve a bit more information before we consider putting it on. Really can't say much more to it.
Thank you, Councillor Sabiri. Councillor Bain?
No, I agree with Councillor Sabiri, Deputy Mayor. I just don't feel comfortable with the inclusion of the Old Pennington Bowling Club site in the land utilisation plan as it appears at this moment, in time. Just the amount of information provided to support its inclusion is just not sufficient for myself or detailed enough for me to vote on the item with confidence. So I'd much prefer it go to an SIB, and so councillors can ask further questions and get more information. The city's position has clearly changed, as there were no plans for the site 12 months ago. So I'm just questions like who instigated the change of plans, what are the city's plans for the site, etc. So I think more needs to be known about the city's plans for the old bowling club site there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bain. Look, I just want to ask a question of Director Kane, just with respect to this. Do the staff have any issues with it? And just maybe if he has any comment with respect to whether the city has any plans or whether they're looking at plans.
Thank you. And through the chair, the first answer is no, the staff won't object to this or don't object to this particular alternate motion. The whole purpose of putting the site into the land utilisation plan was to try and establish some form of certainty about what its future use might be. There is no specific view of the staff. We would need to simply look at a number of options and bring that back to council, which is what we have done for all our other land utilisation items.
Thank you, Director Kane. Does anyone wish to speak on the item? Councillor Holland.
Can you put it back up on, please, Mr. Mayor? We hardly got a look at it.
Yep, no worries. Stacey, are we able to bring that back on the screen? And perhaps normally the mover would read out their motion. This is an alternate motion, so just clarifying that this is the substantive motion, so it's not an amendment or anything along those lines. So we're debating the whole land utilisation plan and also the changes as proposed by Councillor Sabiri to the original officer recommendation.
Would you like me to read it out?
That would normally be the case, Karen. Oh, no, you don't need to, Sarah. We'll just give them time to read it out.
No worries.
To read it, sorry. All right, thanks, Stacey. All right, does any councillor wish to speak? Councillor Holland?
Yeah, I'm on mute anyway. Yes, just a question to start with. Would Councillor Sabiri and Councillor Bain object to including the Canning Arts Centre as an exclusion as well in your motion?
So that would require an amendment.
I'm
So
asking them if they would.
that's not a minor amendment.
So that would be an amendment if their motion got up.
No, so this is a substantive motion. So if you want to move an amendment, you will need to move an amendment to the substantive motion. But what I'm saying is that you don't need Councillor Sabiri and Councillor Bain to agree, because that is a substantive amendment. It's not a minor amendment, and you'd need to go through the formal debating process of moving the amendment. Look, I'll speak in favour of the alternative motion. Look, I just want to make the point that the land utilisation plan is not the old commercial asset strategy or anything along those lines. The whole point of the land utilisation plan is to look at future uses of the land, of the sites. It's not to look at sites for disposal or anything of that sorts. It's to look at whether there's a strategic community use for the land, whether there's an environmental use for the land, or whether there's a commercial use for the land. So by having these sites on the land utilisation plan, it's actually mapping out a future for how we want to use it instead of having it stay vacant. So Councillor Sabiri and Councillor Bain have moved an alternative motion because they believe that they would like to, especially given, I mean, I was around back when we were discussing the old Cannington bowling site, and council at that time said that we didn't want to do the civic master plan, that we didn't want to spend that sort of money on what was proposed, but there will come a time that a future council want to look at it and look at a community use or whatever it might be for that site. It can't, I mean, we vegetated it just so that it wouldn't be a barren pile of sand. But in saying that, there's obviously sensitivities around given what happened at that time. And so I have no issue with removing it so that council can discuss it via a SIP. But I just want to make the point with all the other proposed sites on the land utilisation plan that it's not necessarily looking at disposal or commercialisation. The whole point of having the land utilisation plan is to look for future uses for the site, given that we have so many vacant parcels. I mean, the old Child Health Centre in Shelley Riverton on Barbican Street is an example. I think it's Barbican Street. I mean, I've driven past that many times and wondered what was going to happen there. It's just a vacant lot. So the whole point is to look whether there's a strategic point and map that out. But council will make a decision on the use of the sites in the future. But by removing sites from the land utilisation plan, it's not removing it for potential commercial basis. It's removing anything happening to that land because staff aren't going to be looking at it. So I support what's been proposed and look forward to making decisions on the number of sites that have been included and everything that's been changed. So thank you. I've finished talking. Does anyone else want to speak on the item? No? All right. Nothing to, oh, sorry, Councillor Sweeney. Councillor Sweeney, do you wish to speak to the item or do you have a question?
Well, I have a question, but I'll start off by saying, did we get some resolution? Because I didn't hear the last part of your discussion with Councillor Holland about his amendment. What was the outcome of that?
So what I said was, if he wanted to, he couldn't do what he said via a minor amendment. It was needed to be moved via a formal amendment process.
Yeah, okay, all right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Does anyone wish to speak on the item or have any questions? Councillor Holland?
Yeah, just so I'm clear, if I did want to make an amendment, so this would be voted on, and if we assume that this got passed, then I would move an amendment to that now substantive
so
motion.
we are debating the substantive motion right now. If I put it to the vote, that's the end of the item. If you have an amendment, you can put an amendment and we will debate the amendment if you've got a seconder. And then if
Hang on. We
Pardon?
haven't voted on the amendment yet to make that the substantive motion.
Sorry, Councillor Holland, we are not, so Councillor Sabiri and Councillor Bain did not move an amendment. We are debating, as I've said a couple of times now, we are debating a alternative motion. This is the substantive motion. If this is passed, then we move on.
So how do I do an amendment?
So you are able to propose an amendment right now as part of the, within the standing orders, as part of debate. You can move an amendment to, as you like, to change the substantive motion. And if you have a seconder, we can then debate it. So is there a amendment you'd like to propose?
Before we go, so how did this become the substantive motion when we didn't vote on the changes to the original motion?
So Councillor Sabiri put forward an alternative motion instead of the officer recommendation, and Councillor Sabiri put that motion. Councillor Bain seconded it, and now we're debating it. But that is the substantive motion.
Well, I'd like to put an amendment, please.
As you're well, it's for your purview. What would the amendment be, Councillor Holland?
And to also include as exclusion Project 09, the Canning Arts Centre site in Riverton, to come back to a CIB as well, an SIB as well.
So just bear with me.
All it is doing is including the Civic Arts, the Canning Arts Centre, as well as the Queen's Park Bowling Club site.
So just bear with me. I'll just speak to governance. Just in future, it's beneficial for the meeting to provide amendments and alternative motions in advance, as Councillor Sabiri did. We're just going to
there was going to be an alternate motion. So how could I put an amendment to a motion that I hadn't seen until 5 minutes ago?
You could have provided an amendment in advance to the officer recommendation, and we would have had that on hand. But just clarifying the item number. So Director Kane's just going to provide the item number, and we're just going to look at proposed amending what Councillor Sabiri has provided, and we'll get back to you. One moment, Councillor Holland. Director Kane's just going to comment on the proposed amendment. One moment. As I understand, there's maybe an impact of another council resolution.
Thank you. And through the Chair, Deputy Mayor, you'd be aware through the city's adopted advocacy strategy, we already have a position, as I understand it, on the Canning Arts Centre for its relocation into the Riverton Leisureplex precinct. That's my understanding. It formed part of the advocacy principles adopted last year, and we're advocating or looking for funding to assist that. So it doesn't talk about the future use of the site, but as far as I'm aware, the consolidation into that precinct is part of a previous council resolution.
So Director Kane, what would be the impact of this if it was to go forward, the amendment?
Thank you. Through the Chair, the previous resolution, which is about the consolidation, talks about the consolidation activity. It doesn't, however, refer to the use of the land. So from the perspective of trying to separate the two, we may be able to separate the land, but the intent to consolidate for the use onto the Leisureplex site is something that's part of a previous council resolution. So I think we possibly could exclude the land, but not from the purposes of of retaining its current use unless we have a resolution that revoked things were already progressing through our advocacy strategy.
Just Councillor Holland, given that advice, do you want to proceed with your proposed amendment?
Most definitely. That advice does not preclude it from going back to an SIB. There was no motion put forward at any time saying what we are going to do with that land. There was only a motion put forward to probably look at moving the Canning Arts Centre itself across to the Leisureplex, not to deal with the Canning Arts Centre site, which is what this is.
So what you've been wanting to, what you're wanting to ask for is just for a SIB on that item. So just to, based on what you said, Councillor Sabiri's, what she's added in is to remove it from the land utilisation plan from the attachments, and then ask for a SIB. But you just want a SIB.
No, I want it removed from that, the land utilisation plan, and to have a SIB so that then we council can make a decision on where it's going to go, which way ahead we're going to go. We haven't had a discussion on this at all yet, and they're asking us to spend 70 grand without a discussion.
Okay.
I can't see this as a big issue.
All right. So then I would imagine that you want to say subject to the proposed new land optimisation project 49, former Cannington Bowling Club, and land optimisation project. Do we have the number?
Number 9, Deputy Mayor.
Number 9, thank you. Canning Arts Group site, is that the name? Canning Arts Centre site being excluded in attachments 2, 3 and 4. So I'll just wait for governance to confirm that. Yes, can we please have that on screen, governance? So we'll just change the red and black, I think, so we can see what the amendment is. Does that, are you happy with that, Councillor Holland? Does that need to clarify where it goes?
It should go back up in the middle, shouldn't it?
Yeah.
I'll just, Councillor Holland, your amendment at this point is just to include that Project 9, the Canning Arts Centre, which, if that is carried, we will then move that text up into part 1 above. Okay, so all you're asking, we've got the current motion on the table, which includes that text in part 1 that is in red. You're proposing to add additional text to what is listed in part 1. So your amendment is simply to add those words into part 1. And if that is carried, we're then talking on the substantive motion as amended, which will be what Councillor Sabiri has moved and will include your additional text.
Okay.
Does everyone understand where that's being put and what the amendment is? Sorry, Stacey's just going to add it into the relevant part just so that we can see it as the amendment. It's just after Cannington Bowling Club. Yeah. So do you mind just copying and paste it just so that we can read it, just so there's no confusion? Yeah, well. Yeah, so councillors, that's what the substantive motion as amended, if the amendment is seconded and council supports it, would look like. So have you had enough time to look at it? All right, thanks, Stacey. If you can take that off the screen. All right, is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Sweeney. Councillor Holland, do you want to speak to your amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I do. I think it's important that we have a further discussion on the Canning Arts Centre site. Like I said just before, which we haven't actually discussed at all whether we should be progressing in any shape or form on that site. We haven't said that we wanted to spend $50,000 to consultants to come out and even, or $10,000 to give valuations, legal opinions. We haven't even decided whether we want to sell the site, develop the site, or whatever with the site. It needs to come back to be a council decision whether we want to progress the site in whatever shape or form. The site is a huge site. It is going to be, if for example, it came back with a consultant saying you sell it, as just an example, and council had no input in this whatsoever. This is a once and only sort of, it'll never come back if it went like that. So I think it's imperative that council makes the decision on this. First of all, whether to progress it and in what sort of form to progress it, not to just go straight out to consultants. We have had no vote to employ consultants on this as yet. We should be really coming to have a sip on it, have a discussion on it, work out whether that's the way council wants to go with it, or it could be that council says, no, just leave it as it is. It could be, I don't know, not probably what I would go, but they could say that, right, we're going to leave it as public open space because it's used by walkers and dogs and all this. It could be anything, but we've had no choice. And I don't think we should be preemptive or presumptuous to be going to consultants when council has not said which way we want to proceed, or if at all. And I'll leave it at that at the moment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, or Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Councillor Sweeney.
Yes, thank you. I've only got a few comments to make, but I think one of the key objectives of the land utilisation plan is to rationalise or dispose of low value assets. The Cannington Bowling Club and the Canning Arts Centres isn't a low value asset. Both these sites are high value assets. And I think that critical to the success of the LUP is that elected members are well informed with robust information when making decisions about our land assets. So it does make a lot of sense to obtain more details and facts on both these sites before councillors make a decision. So I agree with Councillor Holland's amendment, and I would urge all councillors to have a look at what's been said and agree with this as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sweeney. Councillor Spencer-Terra has a hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Mayor. I'm sorry, but I'd like to move a procedural motion to defer this item. I think there's a lot of, although I agree 100% with the with Sarah's, with Councillor Sabiri's motion, this whole adding the Canning Arts Group without having the background information, it's just, I'm sorry, it's thrown me out. So I'd like to get some more information before we actually make a decision on this.
All right, Councillor Spencer-Teo, if you're just able to stipulate which meeting you'd like to adjourn this item to.
To the July meeting, please. I think that should give us enough time.
To the July meeting. Right, governance is just putting that. Yeah. Whilst governance is doing that, do we have a seconder? Councillor Singh?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll definitely, I will second.
There is no discussion, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. He was just saying that he was seconding it, Councillor Horn. Ready, Stacey? We'll be putting it on the screen now. Thanks. So the motion is that debate on the item should be adjourned to the July Ordinary Council meeting 2022. All right, Councillor Spencer-Teo, as the mover, do you want to speak to the procedural motion?
Yes, thanks, Deputy Mayor. It's just that I know that staff are in discussions with the Canning Arts Group, and without knowing what the outcome of those discussions are, obviously with it being in my ward as well, I've also been in discussions with the Canning Arts Group. So to throw this up last minute, it's complicated. It's not just as simple as doing it. My understanding of the land utilisation plan may not be the same as other councillors. To me, it's coming to council with options. So I just think that with that, and also the information that was said earlier in the deputation has obviously put a lot of different things out there, and I want to clarify all that information before including that. But like I said, I have no problems with the alternate motion, but yeah, it's just including Canning Arts Group. I'm sorry, I need more time for that one.
All right, thank you, Councillor Spencer-Teo. Now I will be putting this to the vote. So the motion is, Councillor Singh, do you have a question?
I haven't spoken. I'm the second Deputy Mayor.
No, so under standing orders, a procedural motion to defer, to adjourn, only the mover of the motion is able to speak. So no one else is able to speak on the item.
Thank you.
Councillor Singh, no worries. So we'll now put this to the vote. Can you please simultaneously put up your, do you have a question, Councillor Sweeney?
Yeah, can we just get governance to put up the motion again, please?
Governance, are you able to put up the procedural motion to adjourn the item to the July 2022 Ordinary Council meeting?
Do we want to mention in there that the reason why we're adjourning this is for the purpose of having a SIB?
Sorry, Councillor Sweeney, may I just add that the procedural motion is in accordance with standing orders. So all that is required under this particular procedural item is specified which meeting you wish to adjourn. So we are stopping debate on this item and we'll be reconvening it at the July ordinary meeting. So all that is required is simply to say that you want to adjourn this item and to which meeting you want to adjourn it.
So
Okay,
Director,
I
sorry.
understand that, but I thought it was my understanding that I thought I heard that we wanted a SID, and that was the reason why we had this adjournment to the July meeting.
So just to clarify, Councillor Sweeney, Councillor Spencer-Teo's comments were that she wants to seek further information. However, Director Kane has just advised me that they can accommodate it in the July strategic information briefing session. If Councillor Spencer-Teo wants to include it within a procedural motion, that would provide the clarity or the ease of mind to councillors. I'll allow it if that's what you'd like to do. Councillor Spencer-Teo, did you want to move that into your procedural motion?
Yeah, look, I'm happy to do that, but I'm also cognizant that we just had a SIB on this. So it would have been great if these things were brought up then, but obviously, you know, for us to move ahead, I'm happy to do that as a condition of the moving on.
All right,
sorry, the deferment.
Thanks, Councillor Spencer-Teo. So Stacey, I'll just confirm with governance, just one moment, Councillor. Thank you. So just to clarify, Karen has just highlighted that basically we shouldn't include that within the actual recommendation with respect to, it should just basically, the procedural motion is to adjourn the meeting and when the item is, adjourn the item and when it's to be adjourned to. However, it will be noted in the minutes that the item will be provided as part of the strategic issue briefing in July. Director Kane has already given assurity that that is possible and will happen. So if councillors are happy with that, I'll put it to the vote. You're happy with that, Councillor Sweeney? You're nodding your head. Is that okay?
Yep, fine.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, councillors. And so if you can simultaneously please put up your voting cards, we'll now put this to the vote.
Three. Thank you, councillors. The procedural motion to adjourn debate on this item has been carried by absolute majority with 6 in favour and 3 against. Those councillors voting against the procedural motion are councillors Bain, Holland and Jacobs. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. So this will now be adjourned to July. We'll have it as part of the SIB and then we'll come back to debate on this as part of the July Ordinary Council meeting. Moving on to CC 02622, proposed road dedications, lot 66 and lot 67 Ewing Street, Welshpool. The recommendation is on page 90 of the agenda and is on screen now. Thank you, Stacey. Can I please have a mover? Councillor Jacobs. Seconder, Councillor Holland. Councillor Jacobs, would you like to speak to the item?
I support this, Deputy Mayor, and I have nothing further to say. Thank you.
That's great. Councillor Holland?
Yes, I'm happy to second to put the motion, and I support the motion.
Fantastic. Anyone else want to speak on the speak on this item? No? All right, I'll put it to the vote. If you can please show me your voting cards. Councillor Sweeney?
Thank you, presiding member. Item CC-026-22 has been carried unanimously with all 9 in favour.
Wonderful. Moving on. CC 02822, budget review as at the 31st of May 2022. The recommendation is on page 97 of the agenda and is on screen now. An absolute majority vote is required. Thank you, Stacey. Can I please have a mover? Councillor Spencer-Teo. Can I have a seconder? I'll second it from the chair. Councillor Spencer-Teo.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I'm going to reluctantly support this, but I've got no issues with the operating income and expense portion of the budget review. All that makes sense. But where I do have an issue is, I think you probably already know, is our capital works and project blowouts. For example, Webb Street, what a nightmare that's been. Now, I understand the delays and issues we've had with this project, but why are we only finding out about this in a budget review? Secondly, we've got the Burrendar Southern change rooms. We budgeted about 450,000 on this, and now we're up to over 800. And again, after the works have been completed and through a budget review process, we're finding out about this. Upscoping and blowouts may not affect our budget position, but it does impact the existing and future projects. Projects that have some level of community expectations get put on hold or deferred because of this. We got told that we didn't have funds in the budget this year to complete the design work for Shelley Beach Park or Kent Street Weir. Now we're hundreds of thousands of dollars overrun on one or two projects. I mean, how are we as elected members supposed to answer to our communities? I don't agree with the deferring of the projects listed on the table in the report, but rather than taking up time this evening and amending all of that, I'm going to address those next week in our budget meeting. Just finally, I've just got a couple of questions for Director Bowe, if I may, through you, Deputy Mayor, ask those.
Director Bowe, Councillor Spencer-Teo, ask your questions.
Thanks. The first one is, could you please, for the record, inform Council and those listening tonight that the $215,000 of works for Webb Street, being the traffic management and resurfacing of Bull Creek Road to Sandra Way, were works that were brought forward as part of the project and they're not an overrun as such? And secondly, could you also please confirm that the city will conduct a full review as part of its lessons learned post-project completion process and will inform Council of these findings to do with the Webb Street project as well?
Director Bowe.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Spencer-Teo, for the question. Certainly, the $200,000+ of additional works were always intended to be undertaken at the same time as the Leach and Webb intersection upgrade. As previously advised to the elected members, we encountered some unforeseen circumstances at that particular project, and those unforeseen circumstances were not able to be recouped through the black spot funding for this particular project, as the circumstances didn't qualify and didn't relate to any road safety issues. The circumstances were unforeseen ground conditions, unexpected underground utility service locations. We had some issues with the weather, and there was also issues regarding the planned and actual staging of the works and the market conditions. In relation to the second part, absolutely, as with all our projects, we are aiming to improve the delivery and the efficiency of the delivery, and it gives staff no satisfaction at all that this project has blown out in relation to the original budget, and our staff will be working to review the project and to derive the lessons learned from it.
Thank you, Director Bowe. Councillor Spencer-Teo.
Yeah, thanks, Director Bowe and Deputy. I look forward to receiving that report and working through these issues at the budget meeting next week.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer-Teo. Look, as a seconder, I accept the officer recommendation. Councillor Spencer-Teo has made a couple of pertinent points. Also, thank staff for clarifying a few of the things from last week that I was unsure of, especially with respect to Webb Street. But yeah, I support the officer recommendation. Any elected member wish to speak on the item? Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Question, if I may.
Yeah, fire away.
I just wanted to confirm with the city that civil works will commence in the upcoming financial year on the Metcalfe Nicholson Road upgrade. Thank you.
Director Bowe.
I'll defer to Manager of Build Canning, Ashley McKinnon, for the actual details on when that project will start. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Mr. McKinnon. Sorry, Mr. McKinnon, we can't actually hear you. No, sorry. It doesn't look like you're muted, but there's no sound.
And Mr. Deputy Mayor, maybe if I could ask Manager Ben Moore, I know he's online, he may have some information and he may have a working operable microphone.
Thanks, Director Bowe. Mr. Moore?
Yes, through you, Deputy Mayor. The civil works will not commence next year on that project. There is a possibility towards the end of the financial year we may seek to undertake some service relocations. However, there is a significant body of detailed design and consultation work to be undertaken prior to that project being ready. The reason for the early receipt of funding is to align with the main roads criteria for grant distributions.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Councillor Bain?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a follow-up question. Has the design been settled upon yet? Thank you.
Mr. Moore?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, no, at this point in time, there is still a significant body of work to be undertaken, not only via traffic modelling, but with the City of Gosnells and the interested parties adjacent to that site, those being DBCA, Water Corporation, and adjacent landowners.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Councillor Bain, any further questions?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, that's all.
Anyone else wish to speak on the item or ask any questions? Councillor Holland?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like Director Bowe, could you confirm that since the AB and now that I actually sent you quite a detailed list of questions for a complete breakdown of why the cost overruns were of Webb Street?
Director Bowe?
I can confirm that 100%, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and Councillor Holland. I received and responded with some explanatory information under the major headings for the reasons why that project has had some challenges, including exceeding the original budget.
Councillor Holland, anything further?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Any further questions or any elected members wish to speak on the item? All right, no need to rebut. Councillor Spencer-Teo, we'll put this to the vote. Can I please ask all elected members to ready their voting cards and to display their voting cards to me?
2, 3, 5, 6, 7. Thank you, Presiding Member. Motion CC-028-22 has been carried by absolute majority with all 9 in favour.
Thank you, Karen. Moving on, item 13.3 within the Director of Canning Development, CD 01122, the adoption of Scheme Amendment 29 to Town Planning Scheme number 21. The recommendation is on page 119 of the agenda and is on screen now. Thanks, Stacey. Can I please have a mover for the motion? Councillor Spencer-Teo, can I have a seconder, please? I'll second it from the chair. Councillor Spencer-Teo.
I support the officer's recommendation and have nothing to add. Thank you, Deputy.
Thank you. I, as a seconder, support the officer recommendation, have nothing to add. Anyone want to speak on the item or have any questions? All right, we'll put it to the vote. Councillors, can you please have your voting cards ready? And please tell me your voting. Show me your voting cards.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Motion CD-011-22 has been carried unanimously with all 9 in favour.
Thank you very much. Moving on to CD 01222, adoption of draft local heritage survey and draft heritage list, outcomes of public consultation. Councillor Bain has declared a financial interest in this item and will please leave the meeting. Governance, can you please confirm when Councillor Bain has been removed from the meeting?
Confirm, Mr. Presiding Member, that Councillor Bain is in the waiting room.
Thank you. The recommendation is on page 144 of the agenda and is on the screen now. Thanks, Stacey. Can I please have a mover for the item? Councillor Jacobs. Can I have a seconder, please? I'll move it from the chair. Councillor Jacobs.
Thanks, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I think it's important that we recognise the rich history of Canning and recognising heritage listing of places that have historical significance is important. So, yeah, I think it's important that we do that. It stops them being knocked down. Well, it helps in the preservation for future generations. So I have nothing further to add. Thanks, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jacobs. I just echo Councillor Jacobs' comments and support the officer recommendation. Does anyone wish to speak on the item? Councillor Singh?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. A question, if I may.
You may ask a question. Is that to Director Boat?
Yeah,
sorry, Director Bright.
A meeting will travel.
Did the city receive any objections on any of these sites, especially from the landowners, in adding these sites to the heritage list?
Director Bright?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. There is the schedule of submissions attached to the report, but basically the concerns raised related to 316 Wharf Street. So in response to that concern, that was based on some points around heritage. That particular property was moved out of category 3 to category 4. So we understand that particular landowner was comfortable and happy with that, I guess, change. The other one was there were a couple of residents in Montrose Street in Linwood who were concerned about individual property numbers being identified along that particular street. In response to that concern, we took out the street numbers as a reference. So it was more about the streetscape of Montrose Street. And that is not on the heritage list. That just forms part of the heritage strategy. So the heritage strategy includes properties that have some heritage value, but it's only the items that we're adding onto the heritage list, which are in the recommendation, which will have some form of heritage protection. So any works to those 5 properties that are being added requires a development application. So I guess overall, to answer your question, I don't believe there's any additional concerns or objections from any other resident.
Thanks, Director Bride. Any further questions, Councillor Singh?
Just to clarify, Deputy Mayor, so in its current form, the addition of these properties is supported by their landowners. So there is no landowner right now objecting what we are going to approve today in this motion.
Director Bright?
Is that right?
Yeah, through Mr. Deputy Mayor, we have, as I say, we have written to all the property owners for these particular 5 additional places we're recommending be added to the heritage list. And certainly in relation to those 5, there are no outstanding objections to those particular properties being put into the heritage list. As I say, it doesn't mean they can't do any redevelopment of the properties. It just means they need a development application and would need a heritage impact statement to accompany that to justify any works on that site.
Thank you, Director.
Thanks, Councillor Singh. Any other elected member wish to speak on the item or ask any questions? All right. With no one speaking against, I'll put this matter to the vote. Councillors, can you please show me your voting cards?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, motion CD-012-22 has been carried unanimously with 8 in favour, noting that Councillor Bain was out of the room.
Thank you. Governance, can you please confirm when Councillor Bain has been readmitted to the meeting?
Councillor Bain has returned to the meeting.
Thank you, Governance. We now move on to EN 01222 under Director Warren Bowe's purview. The agenda item request for financial commitment of multi-year capital projects from 22-23 to 24-25. Councillor Spencer Teo has submitted an impartiality interest in this item. The recommendation is on page 162 of the agenda, is on screen now. This item was adjourned from the May Ordinary Council meeting. Since then, the mover, Councillor Spencer Teo, and seconder, Mayor Patrick Hole, have advised in writing they wish to withdraw their support for the motion, as Councillor Spencer Teo and myself have also advised that we wish to withdraw support for the amendment. Given the passage of time and the fact that we're considering the budget item next week, it'd be open for council to simply refer the matter to be resolved through the budget adoption of 28th of June 2022. So basically, this item was put forward at a previous council meeting for advanced procurement to happen. Obviously, given there's a week until the council meeting, the council budget meeting, this is now redundant effectively. So if no councillor objects to this motion being withdrawn, we can withdraw the matter and move on to other items. Otherwise, if a councillor has an objection, we need to debate the item, and then obviously the budget is being debated next week. So does anyone have an objection to this item being withdrawn? Councillor Holland has an objection or a question?
No, I've got an objection, serious objections to this. Yes, most definitely.
All right, no problems. That being the case, we will now move to debate. We were within debating the amendment. Councillor Spencer Teo had spoken on the item, on the amendment. I had spoken on the amendment, and we are now into debate on the amendment. Does any councillor wish to speak or ask any questions on the amendment? Councillor Holland.
Yes, Deputy Mayor, I've got some concerns on the amendment, which as far as I can see in the lower writing that we've got now are 3E, 3F.
Just pause for a moment. Well, whilst you're talking, I'll just ask Stacey if she can please put the amendment on the screen.
And 2D, 2E and 2F.
Yep. So the amendment was 2E, 2D, 2E, 2F, and 3E and 3F.
Is that correct? Is that that's right?
Yep. Yeah. So it doesn't all fit on the screen, but Stacey's just going scrolling through it now. All right, Councillor Holland, you wish to speak against the amendment?
Oh yeah, I do. On a few issues, there's a couple of things here. The Canning Vale Street line, there's $400,000 there. There's $2,900,000 in E, 130 in F2E, F, and that. We're going right outside the budgetary process here on this one. As far as I can see, that it's just been added. There's been no workshop, no discussion about it, whether we should be including these at all. Now, just so that I've got the fact, well, what we're voting here was an amendment, not a new substantive motion. Is that all?
We are debating. So when the item was adjourned at the previous council meeting, we were debating the amendment. So we are now discussing the amendment.
So if I say, like, I don't like this part on the amendment, if it got defeated, then we would go back to the original substantive motion and then discuss that. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think we can go outside. These are two bigger items to be included here without having any further discussions or SIBs or anything on here at all. It does worry me that they've been included in something that we're not even sure of. The multi-year budgetary process that's been put forward. So I cannot support the amendments on this one in this instance at all, I'm afraid. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I just want to confirm that the mover and seconder expressed a desire to withdraw the amendment. Is that correct?
So the movers of the motion and amendment expressed a desire to withdraw the whole motion. given that we are debating, this is formed part of the budget process, as Councillor Holland just pointed out, and that we will be discussing this as part of the budget process next week. This item was originally intended to be provided over a month ago to give advance notice for procurement. That is no longer relevant. So basically, we're now debating something that'll be dealt with next week. So yes, we basically provided support to withdraw as we found this item superfluous.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Anyone else wish to speak on the item? All right, Councillor Spencer-Terry, can you please provide your concluding remarks, noting that Councillor Holland was the only one that spoke against?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Obviously, I was happy to withdraw this because it is, as you said, not even going to try and say it, sorry.
Superfluous.
That's the one, superfluous. But just to clarify or to rebut Councillor Holland's remarks, these figures and these projects have not been plucked from nowhere. These are actually taken from the long-term financial plan and corporate business plan. We spent months developing this suite of documents, and we only decided on them a few months ago. So this shouldn't really come as a surprise because it's all there. These are not, they're nothing new, like I said, but at the original, the first portion of this officer recommendation is moot now. It was time critical and we've missed that window. The other projects and the amendments are all coming up in the budget next week anyway. They're all in there. So it really is irrelevant, this whole thing. So which is why it was worthwhile withdrawing, not necessarily debating. But that's all I'll say, and we'll move on.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer-Terry. Can you please ready your voting cards? And can you please put it to the, show me your voting cards.
1, 2. Through you, presiding member. So the amendment for this item has been carried, 5 in favour, 4 against, with councillors Holland, Sweeney, Jacobs and Bain voting against the amendment.
Thank you, Karen. We now move to the substantive motion. Councillor Holland, do you have a question?
Yeah, just a question, please. What sort of voting majority is required on that? I would have thought it would have been absolute.
No, that was just that was the amendment. So just going to seek clarification from governance. One moment.
Thank you.
Councillor Holland, part 1 of this motion, part 1 of the substantive motion requires an absolute majority, but parts 2 and 3 are a simple majority. So the amendment related to parts 2 and 3.
Thank you, Karen, and good question, Lindsay. So we now move to the substantive motion, which was originally moved by Councillor Spencer-Teo. And she moved the amendments. Did you have anything to add, Councillor Spencer-Terry? I think you had already added, spoke on the motion.
I did.
Councillor, the Mayor is the seconder who is absent today, so unable to speak. We now move on to debate on the item. Does anyone wish to speak? Can I ask for it to be the substantive motion to be put on the screen just before I move to Councillor Bain? So part 1 is with regard to the city's fleet renewal, and part 2 is respect to what we just debated, and part 3 as well. And at the previous council meeting, Councillor Sweeney requested that parts 1 be voted on separately to parts 2 and 3. And the mayor agreed, so we'll continue down that line. So when we get to voting, we'll vote on them separately. So thanks, Stacey. If you can just put up the councillors. Councillor Bain, would you like to speak or ask a question?
Ask a question if I may, Deputy Mayor.
Yep, you can ask a question.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to see if it would be possible for the city to advise via its website, particularly the Kent Street Weir precinct plan page, that it won't be conducting any civil works at the site next financial year, and that only design and sub-consultants will be engaged. I was just wondering if that might be possible, please, because obviously it's of high community interest. Thank you.
Director Bowe, are you able to just respond to that?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Look, I would caution against that. Whilst the allocation in the draft budget intends to progress those works, Councillor Bain, other funding opportunities or other opportunities may arise that would enable the city to commence further work. So whilst I think I understand your intent to condition the community as to the likely progress of physical works on the site, I wouldn't like to create any unrealistic expectations, but I'm happy to take that offline and work with you on some communications, and then speak with our project managers and the comms team generally about how we can achieve that.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Bain?
Yes, Deputy Mayor, not a problem. That's
Anything
great.
further? No. Anyone else wish to speak? Or Councillor Jacobs has his hand up.
Yeah, I've got a question. Can you just put up on the screen what we're actually, I know that there was an amendment, but can you put up the substantive or the main thing that we're just talking about? And then the question is, because of this, is the argument was made earlier that this is a bit late and so we can just do it through the budget process. So my question is, if we proceed with this, will that proceed, will that, replace that budget process?
I don't believe so. I understand. So basically the part 1 was fleet procurement that we were wanting to do in advance. That was the main point of it, but also acknowledging with 2 and 3 that it was multi-year projects. But I'll ask, is Director Bowe, are you able to respond to that?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. No, it won't, because as you'll see in part 2 of the recommendation, it is only seeking inclusion in the draft, and the budget is only draft until such times as council will consider and resolve to endorse it, which is intended to occur next Tuesday.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Jacobs?
Yeah, it does. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Anyone have any questions or want to comment or provide debate? Councillor Holland?
Mr. Mayor, I would like further clarification on this. I'm looking at number 1 and number 2.
Yep.
The wording endorses the city's fleet renewal. This is a question. Renewal program as contained so on in the draft budget. And number 2, endorses the following capital works programs, blah, blah, in the draft budget. How can 1 be absolute majority and 2 not be? They're the same thing. I understand 3 maybe, but how can 2 not be absolute majority?
Director Kane, are you able to respond to that?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Item 1 involves the simple expenditure of all that money in a single year. The project listed in item 2 are ones that would be multi-year, and it's only a partial allocation that's necessary for each of those projects.
How does that make it that an absolute majority is not required? That's, to me, that is completely irrelevant. You're still proposing 250, 550 and 5 million and 1.918. I can't, that argument does not hold water with me, I'm afraid. If one is absolute majority, two should be absolute majority. There's no wriggle room here.
Sorry, Director Bowe or Director Kane, do you have anything further to add?
Yes, Deputy Mayor, if I can just add, I think the reason why we sought an absolute majority was in relation to the final line item of part 2, identifying the authorisation and raising of the purchase orders, whilst the actual expenditure will be incurred in 2020 was proposed, albeit this was back in May, on May the 17th, 2022, was proposed to be incurred in the next financial year. We sought an absolute majority to put forward the raising of the purchase orders.
And if I can just add, Deputy Mayor, with item 1, it's a specific allocation of a very specific sum. And as Director Bowes just noted, that would actually allow procurement action on those long lead time items to happen. Whereas with item 2, if there are identified funding requirements, it may well vary when it actually comes to the final budget.
Thank you, Director Kane and Director Bowe. Does that answer your questions, Councillor Holland? Have you got anything further to add?
Yeah, I have got something further to add. I noticed they've answered the question, and that's probably as far as that I go. I want to put on the record that I can strongly disagree with that. You cannot have one absolute majority and not the other.
Oh, with respect, Councillor Holland, no.
Sorry?
Sorry, with respect, the staff have just outlined why an absolute majority was required in terms of procurement and the exact figure, and how that differs from points 2 and 3 and why that is required. It's not to dismiss the advice provided. It's been provided by staff, and that's a simple clarification.
Deputy Mayor, I've got absolutely every right to disagree with advice supplied by staff if I think it's wrong.
Yes, but you may do so in a respectful way, Councillor Holland.
Sorry?
You may do so in a respectful way. You don't just dismiss the comment provided. They provided the advice as to why, and it's true and correct. It's not just false.
I have got absolute right to disagree with what they said. Now, I did do this in a respectful way, and I do not like the insinuation that I was disrespectful. I was quite respectful. I said, I don't agree, and I'm allowed to say I don't agree.
I don't think that's exactly everything you said.
I don't agree.
Councillor Holland, I believe you did it in a disrespectful way, and that's why I clarified. Can you please move on, and we'll no longer have this discussion?
No. You tell me how I was disrespectful. Sorry.
Councillor Holland, under 7.13, I believed that you were objectionable expressions with respect to the staff advice. Now, I don't know why you need to make a thing of it. Can we just please move on with debate?
Look, for the sake of expediency, I will move on, but I do not like being told I was disrespectful when I wasn't.
All right, moving on, Councillor Holland.
Now I'd like to speak against this motion.
Yeah, that's your prerogative. Councillor Holland is speaking against.
Yes, look, I've got some real issues with this multi-year budgetary process. We've even had legal advice saying that, from what I understand, that we cannot do it. And we've said, in summary, the Advice on Local Government Act does not permit council to, and if I vote, indicated that the above does not prevent administration proposing a works program, which is clear. Well, we do that anyway. I can't see how we need to do this. We're going to have issues on where this year's budget is as opposed to next year's. It's not actually going to be defined because it's going to be multi-year, and it's going to come back and depend on how much money was spent on whatever project during that year. I'm going to find it hard to work out exactly what the budget process, or position rather, is if we're going multi-year. The budget is the 2022, 2023, 2023, 2024. They're individual budgets. And as far as I understand, that's exactly the way they should. We have been doing multi-year tasking, like the city centres, a classic example. And we'll provide funds in each year when it's sort of required, I suppose, but that's multi-year, and we know that, and it's several, or it's tens of millions of dollars. We've done that in a lot of other projects as well. And if Canning Vale ever comes up, it'll be that one as well. But to actually put it in a multi-year budget, I've got real concerns about that. The budget is 2022, 2023. It's not, I can't. Pardon?
Director Bowe, I believe you have your microphone on, and Councillor Jacobs.
What was that?
I added on to clarify who was talking.
What was that noise?
Sorry, there's someone had their microphone on. Please continue, Councillor Holland.
Yeah, I can't, in good conscience, vote for a multi-year budgetary process like this. It goes against my whole principles of what I have discussed, especially when we did our training at Walga and on the budget to progress that Walga has put in the training schedule for every single councillor. I've got some real, I cannot go ahead with this in this the way it is worded at the moment, and the whole scenario, especially after what the legal advice we've got. I'm not happy with this, so I will be voting against it, and we'll see how we go. I'll be happy to vote against it, so it'll be fine.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Does anyone else want to speak on the item? Councillor Bain.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a question for the city. Why wasn't the poor lighting program included, as that's obviously a multi-year project as well?
Director Bowe.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. We had 3 projects that are put forward in the draft budget that are both preliminary designed and, in one particular case, detailed design that will go out to market, and those projects will be completed during the financial year next year.
Thank you, Director Bowe. Councillor Bain.
So just for clarification, so why wasn't the poor lighting program included? I'm just
Director
not
Bowe.
quite understanding.
Because they weren't multi-year projects, Councillor Bain. That's when we originally drafted the report and presented it in May. There were 3 projects that the staff identified as multi-year projects. It's since been amended to include a number of others. So we didn't identify the 3 projects as multi-year projects.
Councillor Bain.
Okay, thank you. So then does the city support the inclusion of the Corinthian Park Hall as a project?
Director Bowe.
The Corinthian Park Hall was an amendment put forward by Councillor Spencer Teo, and I believe last week I answered the question in relation to inclusion of those works, and that the preliminary works will be design and consultation and engagement, and then at a later time, a subsequent budget year, we will seek allocation to undertake the physical works.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Sweeney.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Mr. Bowe a question about Corinthian Park because it's just popped up in here. Why Corinthian Park wasn't even in our long-term financial plan? It wasn't mentioned in our corporate business plan. So why are we in a situation where we're even debating the inclusion of Corinthian Park Hall here?
Director Bowe.
The simple answer for that, Deputy Mayor, is because it was included as an amendment. However, an allocation exists within our architecture team for design of future projects. It's a sum of between $200,000 and $300,000 that future projects are costed to in the design phase that our architects work on, and in the engagement of any other consultants or other specialists that are required to progress a project from concept to detailed design to enable us to go to market to undertake the project.
Thanks, Director Bowe.
Well, that's
Director Kane, did you have anything further to add to that question?
If I could just clarify, and I refer you to the city's corporate business plan on page 32, where the Corinthian Park project is listed as one to be delivered over 2 years, 2022-23 to 2023-24.
Thank you for that clarification, Director Kane. Councillor Sweeney. Councillor Sweeney, any questions? Otherwise, move on. I think I saw Councillor Jacobs' hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Mayor. Another question.
Councillor Sweeney, can you just turn your microphone off? Thank you. Councillor Jacobs.
Another question, if I may. This was going to be delisted as long as there wasn't one councillor that objected. Now there's been a councillor that has objected to it, but then objected to the motion. So I don't understand the rationale of doing that. If you didn't want the motion, then why would you object to the motion disappearing? That's just for my first thing, for my sort of clarity of thought.
Thank you, Councillor Jacobs. That's a very good observation. Anyone else wish to add to this debate?
One more question.
Yep, Councillor Jacobs.
So let's just say I'm looking at point 2, Shelley Beach Master Plan 250, Kent Street Weir Master Plan 550,
yep.
Greens Park Open Space Master Plan 500,000. This is stuff that we've already been talking about, and essentially, even if we don't pass this motion, essentially we will be proceeding down that way anyway. So my question is, if it wasn't to get up, is there essentially similar guidance there, or is this better in the sense that it gives more clarity? Is the administration require or need clarity, or is it something that they naturally do because that's the strategic direction that council wants them to go anyway?
So I'll ask Director Bowyer and Director Kane to respond to that.
Well,
so Director Bow?
My quick response to that would be it will be again considered next week anyway, when the council consider the annual budget for 2022-2023.
Thank you, Director Bow. Anything further, Director Kane?
Thank you, and through the chair. One of the key principles is, and I used the example given of the Queen's Park master plan or open space. That project is valued at 6.8 million. We will only be able to deliver $5 million of the work for that. You do need an allocation then in the subsequent year of at least 1.8. So this was, again, a process by which we're trying to give the community some certainty that we would be putting in forward the complete sum, but more importantly then from council's perspective, not have to put the complete sum in 1 year, knowing that we had no way of actually spending it all of that and simply carrying across these large amounts of capital at the end. And council is asking that logical question, well, why aren't you spending the budget staff?
Thank you, Director Kane. Does anyone want to speak on the item? Yeah, Councillor Jacobs, do you have another question, or do you want to speak on it?
Look, sorry for those questions, but I just sort of needed to.
No need to apologise.
Ask a few questions for clarity. Look, I think it's something that I can support, and I don't think that in any way short circuits the budget process. I think that we just need to make decisions as we go. I may have been happy to let this lapse and use the budget process, but now that I'm here and you're asking me for an opinion, yes or no, I think they're all very worthy projects. And I do know that with a lot of the cost pressures, we can't sort of pull out a rabbit out of the hat in the year and just say, okay, here's some money. We need to have that clarity going forward into the, not just this financial year, next financial year, but for many years. So I think in the sense that it gives clarity, and I think the projects are worthy, I'll be supporting it. But then again, when the budget comes up, I'd like to, it may be the case that the situations change, but at this stage, as Tuesday, the 21st of June 2022, I think it's the best way to go. Worthy projects, and I think it gives the benefit of giving clarity to the administration. So yeah, I supported it in its current form. However, in the future, should other things come up, then we'll have a look at it then. But at this moment, I'm fine with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jacobs. I too am speaking in favour of the officer recommendation or the substantive motion as amended. I mean, what's put forward, as I said before, was intended the reason officers put it forward was for give more time for procurement. But everything within this item is based on our draft budget, corporate business plan and long-term financial plan. There's nothing surprising here. The way it has been written has been based on legal advice. Staff sought that legal advice to make sure that they didn't put a officer recommendation that was contrary to statute law. And so I have no issue with what has been proposed. In fact, it is responding to concerns or questions raised over a long time by sitting councillors and previous councillors with respect to overruns into subsequent financial years. And the intention is to provide a bit more transparency with respect to multi-year projects. However, as was mentioned before, it is somewhat superfluous. I think we should vote in favour of the officer recommendation, because I don't know why I would vote against supporting these projects and then subsequently come back next week and potentially support the projects. I think all these listed projects are things that we're intending to do, which is why they're nominated. And so I'll be voting in favour of the substantive motion as amended. And I encourage councillors to do the same. Does anyone else wish to speak? Otherwise, I'll be putting it to Councillor Spencer-Terra to end debate. Councillor Spencer-Terra, can you please end debate?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. To be honest, I'm quite confused as to why I'm even doing this. We had an opportunity to take this off the table, but here we are. Anyway, to confirm what Director Kane said in contradiction to Councillor Sweeney's comment, on page 32, it actually says that we will commit $770,000 to the Corinthian Park Hall. So to say this has come from nowhere, it's here in our corporate business plan that we endorsed 12, 13 weeks ago. So is everything else on here. The whole purpose for this officer recommendations in the first place was obviously to be able to put the purchase order in for the fleet. We can't do that now. We've missed the boat on that. And the rest was just to give some community security over these projects that we had already supported through the long-term financial and corporate business plan. So again, I'll say it again, it's there, it's nothing new. There's no reason not to support this. Let's just move on and get on with it. Thanks, Deputy.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer-Terra, for ending debate. So as advised earlier, we'll be voting on part one of the substantive motion first, and then after we've voted on that, we'll vote on parts 2 and 3 separately. So parts 1, are we just able to have that on the screen for a second? Is that required? Thanks, Stacey. That's good. So part 1, if you can please show me your voting cards now. Councillor Sweeney?
I can hardly hear anything that's going on here. What's
sorry, I'm not sure. So we're voting on part 1 of the officer recommendation of the substantive motion as amended. Apologies.
Something about the recommendation. Can I see up on screen? Maybe that might help me a bit here. So I can't.
Yeah, we just had it on screen, Councillor Sweeney. So, Stacey, do you mind putting that back up just for a brief moment?
Oh yeah. Okay. No. It's all right.
Yep.
Thanks.
So now can you please show us your voting card, Councillor Sweeney? Thank you.
Sorry, could I have Councillor Jacobs vote? I didn't get that.
Sorry.
Thank you. The substantive motion as amended for adjourned item EN-012-22 has been carried. 7 in favour, 2 against, with councillors Holland and Sweeney voting against the motion.
Thank you, Governance. Now we'll move to voting on parts 2 and 3 as part of the substantive motion as amended. Stacey, are you able to just bring that up for a moment, please? So that's point 2. And then scrolling down. Thanks, Stacey. All right. Can you please have your voting cards ready? And please go to the vote. Show me your voting cards.
Thank you. Parts 2 and 3 of adjourned item EN-012-22 has been carried. 7 in favour, 2 against, with councillors Holland and Sweeney voting against the motion. Can I also just confirm that part 1 was carried by an absolute majority, 7 in favour, 2 against. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to EN-013-22, review of policy ET 520, conservation of flora and fauna. The recommendation is on page 177 of the agenda and is on the screen now. Sorry, I have sorry, can I please have a mover? Councillor Spencer-Teo, can I have a seconder? I'll second it from the floor, from the chair, sorry. Councillor Spencer-Teo, do you wish to speak to the item?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy. Firstly, I'd like to say a big thank you to staff for engaging Mike Bamford and the Sustainability Environmental Advisory Group to work on this review and the development of this policy. I'd also like to acknowledge Lynn Manuel from Wildlife Care WA, who's been working tirelessly year after year with many local governments to create or amend their existing policies to prioritise the welfare of fauna and flora before development. Lynn has worked with both the City of Wanneroo and the City of Swan on their policies and has provided feedback on this draft policy. She said that this is one of the most comprehensive policies that she has seen to date. So I'm really hopeful that this, if adopted tonight, will be used as a benchmark for other local governments who are due to either review or create their flora and fauna policies. This is something to be really proud of, councillors and of course staff, so well done. I would just like to move a very minor amendment, if I may, which I sent earlier through to governance, and that's just to replace a couple of, well, one word twice in the actual policy.
Governance, can you please put that on the screen?
So that's just replacing the word feasible with practicable when it comes to the management of fauna on sites owned by the city.
Yep. And did you just want to clarify why?
Well, basically, because obviously planting vegetation, waiting for it to grow elsewhere in the context of flora, and killing an animal is far easier and convenient and or feasible than relocating it or rehabilitating it or just simply leaving it there and building around it. But at the end of the day, practicality has to be applied. And by this simple change of the word, we'll do what's practicable, i.e. achievable, rather than what's easy and convenient.
As a second, I'm happy to accept that as a minor amendment.
Thank you.
Unless anyone has any issue with that. Councillor Holland?
No, I don't have any issue. I'm trying to find where it is the amendment's going.
So part 4.4 within the policy and part 5.3, it currently says feasible in those parts of the policy, and Councillor Spencer-Teo is intending to change it to practicable.
So it's on one page 185 and 186 through you, Deputy Mayor, on the agenda, if that helps.
Thanks, that's what I wanted. So I've got 185, locally natural fauna on land managed by the City of Canning for?
So 4.4 currently says where feasible, the city will prioritise the retention, protection and extension of locally natural vegetation and so forth. And Councillor Spencer wants it changed to practicable. So where practicable, the city will prioritise the retention, protection and extension of locally natural vegetation. And then further on, part 5.3, it currently says where it has been determined that locally natural fauna requires active management, a review of available options must be undertaken prior to the management activity commencing. Where feasible, preference will be given to non-lethal humane options, including fauna relocation.
And that's changing feasible to practical there as well.
Practicable, yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool.
All right. Being no objections, it's a minor amendment and the policy will now be amended as accordingly. So have you finished all your debate on that motion, Councillor Spencer-Teo?
I was just going to say, I hope that you all support me in the adoption of this policy so that we, the City of Canning, can start our journey of becoming a local government who puts the environment before roads and buildings wherever possible. That's it. Thank you.
Well said, Councillor Spencer-Teo. Look, I just echo Councillor Spencer-Teo's comments and commend staff to hear that sort of feedback from people within the animal sphere is just remarkable, and staff should be extremely proud of themselves. So thank you. It's a good step forward with respect to this policy, and I hope that it leads to better environmental outcomes going forward. But in saying that, I just support the officer recommendation, and I hope council does too. Can I ask if any councillor has a question or wish to speak on the item? All right, put it to the vote. Can you please have your voting cards ready? All those, can you please show me your voting cards? Councillor Holland and Jacobs, can you please raise your voting cards?
Through you, presiding member, motion EN-013-22 has been carried unanimously with all 9 in favour.
Thank you, Governance. Moving on to EN-014-22, request for commemorative bench plaque, policy CM-188, for long and exemplary service of John and Hazel Regan. The recommendation is on page 189 of the agenda and is on screen now. Thanks, Stacey. Can I please have a mover for the motion? Councillor Jacobs. Can I please have a seconder? Councillor Holland. Councillor Jacobs.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think it's important, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I think it's important that we recognise long and exemplary service. And I think that John and Hazel Regan definitely meet that criteria. I've always been tried to be fairly consistent with these sorts of issues, and I've always tried to vote for motions that commemorate people that have passed on or done, you know, exemplary things. So I think it's a nice touch, and yeah, I don't see anything wrong with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jacobs. Councillor Holland.
I support the motion, nothing further to add.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Anything further from any other elected members? All right, I'll put it to the vote. Please get your voting cards ready, and please now show me your voting cards. Councillor Holland.
Thank you. Motion EN-014-22 has been carried unanimously with all 9 in favour.
Thank you, Governance. Moving forward, EN-015-22, order of accessible parking at City of Canning controlled and owned facilities. The recommendation is on page 195 of the agenda and is on screen now. Thanks, Stacey. I will be moving this from the chair. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Singh. Look, I spoke a bit about this when I first put the notice of motion up, so I won't speak for too much, but I just want to say, I can't imagine what it's like to live in someone's shoes where movement and I'm pretty lucky in terms of not needing to worry about where I find a park and recognising that sometimes that's the difference between whether or not some people within the City of Canning and those visiting the City of Canning can attend a shop, attend a facility as the program for ensuring that people don't utilise Aqua Base when they shouldn't. That is someone's day potentially. It is imperative that we do all we can to provide accessible parking, and I think that businesses and other entities should do all they can to make sure that their parking, whilst they might not have to under statutory obligations upgrade their parking to meet current standards. I think it's great that the city has now done an audit and now has a plan going forward to how we can upgrade and improve our parking at parks at various locations across the city to ensure that we have the most accessible parking possible. And wish we could do it all in 1 year and upgrade it. And there's varying reasons or varying levels of degradation in terms of the infrastructure and so forth, and reasons why it may or may not comply. But we now have a roadmap, and I hope that council can unanimously support this recommendation to bring our car parking up to a suitable standard and make sure that that our facilities and our parks are accessible. So please, council, support this recommendation. Move on to the seconder. Councillor Singh, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I would like to say I fully support this motion, and I would like to share with the council, when I moved to Australia almost 14 years ago, one of the first things I noticed that how great this country is, that everywhere I go, at every shopping center, every place, a thought has been given about who is going to come there and how they're going to access that space for kids, for old people, for people on wheelchairs. Huge amount of money has been spent, but it's very inclusive, diverse, and the government here thinks about everyone. And this motion is exactly in that direction. It is our responsibility to think about everyone in our community. So I fully support this, and I ask our fellow councillors to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Councillor Jacobs, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Yeah, I think it's to use an American expression that seems to have leached into Australian vernacular. It's a no-brainer. I think it's good. Look, I know it's sort of human nature if you don't use one of these places that you sort of pay it off, but I know some people have very delicate setups. Like, for example, the wheelchair will come down from the roof and land in a certain spot, and they'll need to move themselves onto that wheelchair. Yeah, it's obviously some little things like curbs and trees and tree roots could really be the difference between being able to access that spot and not being able to access that spot. And I just hope that also that these spots are, how should I say, kept sort of for people that need access. Sometimes there's a tendency for people in the community to perhaps use them as a, bit of a short park, but I think that's no good. So, I mean, if this, I think this was a good step, and to ideally to recognise if there's improvements, then we do them, and also maybe we could sometimes remind people that they might be vacant most of the time in their mind, but it could be the difference between someone being able to access a park or a library or a shopping centre or not being able to. So I think there's two things there: support it and also support a little bit more education to some people that it sort of slips their mind as to the importance of these aqua. Okay, that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Jacobs. Does anyone else wish to speak on the item? All right, that being the case, with nothing to rebut, I won't comment. Please have your voting cards ready and I'll put it to the vote. Please show me your voting cards.
Thank you. Motion EN-015-22 has been carried unanimously, all 9 in favour.
Thank you, Governance. We'll now move on to the 7.5, the Director of Canning Communities portfolio. That's CO 00522, adjourned item. Motion carried at the 2022 AGM of electors, viability assessment of CCTV partnership. Councillor Singh has declared an impartiality interest in this item. The recommendation is on page 202 of the agenda, is on screen now. So when we debated this previously, Mayor Hall, who's absent today, was the mover. Councillor Singh was the seconder. Councillor Singh, I do not believe has spoken on this item, so I'll put it to Councillor Singh to please speak to the item if he so wishes.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I do not support this motion, and I would like to, before I speak against it, I would like to foreshadow this motion with the original motion, which was passed at the AGM. The wording of that original motion is actually in the starting of this item, which is moved by Associate Professor P. Kaur and seconded by Ms. K. Kaur.
Just bear with us for a second, Councillor Singh. Sorry, Councillor Singh. So the governance doesn't have a copy of the motion that you're referring to. Are you able to provide the wording for what you're referring to?
Mr. Deputy Mayor, the original motion is actually in brief of this motion. So I'll say the page number 201 of this meeting, and it says, so I'm happy to speak it up, but it's actually right there in the document. So the officer recommendation, one page before that, the original motion is there, where the officer recommendation is about this motion. So item C0.
So you want the original electors meeting motion as
that's
the
right, which,
council agenda?
yes, which says the start of CCTV. I'll say it out loud just to clarify.
Yeah.
The original motion is start a CCTV partnership program to assist private residences to install an effective CCTV system to address crime and safety problems through visual surveillance. Point number 2, provide half of the total cost of CCTV system up to $7.50 per project. Part number 3, allocate at least 1% of city's total operating budget towards funding the CCTV program.
Thanks, Councillor Singh. My only concern with that is that it's actually an electors meeting motion and isn't in the format of a council resolution. For example, authorising or requesting the CEO to take an action. I'll just confirm with governance, just one moment, Councillor Singh.
Excuse.
Is Director McQuaid there? Are you able to comment with respect to whether that's possible in terms of the wording as a officer?
Mr. Mayor, may I say something quickly, please?
Sure.
The
Go ahead,
motion,
councillor. Hold on.
the motion to cancel, is not what was read out. That is not the motion that is in cancel. That's not the original motion. That is the motion that was cancelled, was carried at the AGM.
Yeah,
It is not the motion that it was before cancel, whether alternate motion or post alternate motion.
So
The
councillor
motion that
Singh,
was- sorry?
yeah, so councillor Singh's not proposing to foreshadow the original officer recommendation. He's proposing to foreshadow the electors meeting motion. As I said, I don't think that's in a format that's conducive to a council resolution. I'm just asking Director McQuaid for her advice. Director McQuaid.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We would need to move the motion that was moved at the annual general electors meeting. We would need to include at the beginning that council resolves to authorise the CEO to establish a CCTV partnership program. 2 would be that council resolves to provide half of the total cost of the system up to, and 3 would need to be that authorises the CEO to list an amount, and I can give you the actual dollar amount of 1.1% if you prefer, in the draft budget.
If I may, Deputy Mayor.
Yes, councillor Singh.
Thank you, Director McQuaid. I agree with most of your recommendations. However, with point 3, this is up to the council whether they would like to allocate that much amount of budget or not. So saying it to list in the budget basically changes the intent. So with all due respect, I would like to keep the intent same of the motion, but happy to change the wording to amend it as per the city standards. But changing it, listing for the budget as compared to approving it is a complete, they are completely two different things.
So we don't approve the budget as of tonight. So what Director McQuaid is saying is that we would list the funding within the budget, which we're considering next week. But given if that was to be supported, I doubt the council would then be removing it from the proposed draft budget. Director McQuaid's just providing wording that enables your proposed electors meeting motion to become a council resolution. So right now, allocate at least, the way it's written is not conforming with that council resolution. Is that correct, Director McQuaid? Yeah.
Yes, that's correct, Deputy Mayor.
So we're just waiting for governance to put together what's been suggested, and we'll just, when it's on the screen, we'll just be able to clarify. Just be one moment. And I know sometimes it's not possible, but it's always good to be able to discuss these with the directors and also provide forewarning to governance. Just it helps us not have to do this on the run and work out a best way to write it. So it's always advisable if you're willing to, if you're intending to do something, I'll put an alternative motion to discuss it. It's your prerogative not to, but it just helps within the functioning of council meetings. So that's on the screen.
Excuse me, Deputy Mayor.
Yep, go ahead, Director McQuaid.
I would suggest that we include the dollar figure in 3. Rather than 1%.
Yeah. So how much is the 1%? It's 1 point.
I'm happy to make it around $1 million. That's around 1%. I mean, it's a bit less than 1%, but that's if that's okay, if that's acceptable. It will be nice to actually, sorry, it will be nice to mention it, that how much percentage is it, close to 0.9%, just for the context that how much money we are looking to spend on this program. So if we can mention that 1 million equates to roughly 0.9% or 0.98%, that will be.
So helpful. Just tell us what you want the actual recommendation to say. We won't debate it now, but just, okay. So allocate 1 million. I mean, you can always provide that figure or that percentage as part of your debate as well. But so allocate $1 million of the city's operating budget. Sorry, Director McQuaid, do you have?
Sorry, I was just going to say, I would suggest that it is just allocate $1 million towards the funding of the CCTV program. And Councillor Singh, unless you have the exact figure of the percentage, I wouldn't be putting it in the council resolution because council resolutions are held to. So you would address that in your rationale.
That's okay. I think 1 million is actually, on second thought, I would like to keep it with 1% of the total operating budget. That is
okay. So
a better figure.
Thank you.
Exact 1% of whatever our total operating budget is going to be for next year.
May I, Deputy Mayor?
And remove the 1 million.
Go ahead, Director McQuaid.
Yep. Stacey, if you can just pause. So it's going to be allocate the dollar amount. So we're going to say allocate 1.23 million towards funding and then delete the rest. CCTV program.
Director McQuaid, may I request that we add that 1.23 million is 1% of proposed city's operating budget, so that we have this context.
Yeah. Yep.
Could they not potentially, though, not be accurate because 1% may end up being 1.25% come budget time? Is that accurate?
It's of the current operating budget. So that's what we would be basing it on, of the 2021-22 financial year. Yep.
And so are you happy, Director McQuaid, with points 1 and 2, if we were to debate them, obviously, with respect to that there already is an incentive scheme, and point 2 is clear as well?
Program, through you, Deputy Mayor, given that the city already does have a security incentive scheme that already does include CCTV, you may need to adjust 1 to state to establish a standalone CCTV partnership program.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Singh?
With the foreshadowed motion wording, yes, I'm happy with the wording which is on the screen right now.
Thank you. So Director McQuaid has just pointed out that we already have a security incentive scheme that has CCTV. So it might be advisable to change it to request the CEO to initiate a standalone CCTV program, so it differentiates itself from our current security incentive scheme. Is that okay?
So just to clarify, Deputy Mayor, the discussion, the alternative motion moved by Mayor was actually about it. And there are some simple but significant flaws in our security incentive scheme. And that is the reason why I'm foreshadowing this to have a standalone CCTV program. So I'm trying to keep it separate.
Okay, you can do the propose the foreshadowed motion as you see fit, and if we get to debate it, we'll then seek advice from governance. So that's all right.
Excuse me.
Yes, Director McQuaid.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor. Just one other point of consideration, and it is outlined in the council report. Allocating 1.23 million towards the program is fine, except that we don't have the staff to deliver the program, and that is outlined in the report, which would mean another budget allocation. I'm just pointing that out for everyone's point of view.
All right. If we get to debating on this.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah.
My concentration, I got half that. Could the director please just tell me those last 2 sentences again? I just didn't quite click. And I think if you say it again, I will.
The last 2 sentences of what? Sorry, Councillor Jacobs.
The director was making a point about the budgeting, and I got 1 sentence, and the second sentence I just need to hear again.
Director McQuaid, are you able to repeat?
Point of order, Deputy Mayor. this is not in the debate, the foreshadow motion. So we are not debating, the officers cannot provide information whether that is feasible or not. That can be provided when requested during the debate.
Yeah, I'll Director McQuaid is just trying to provide relevant information, but if we come to the debate on the foreshadowed motion, we'll ask Director McQuaid to repeat that, Councillor Jacobs. So we'll move to debate. You can continue your discussion on the seconding of the as the adjourned motion, sorry, as the seconder. Do you wish to speak to it?
Sorry, Deputy Mayor, could I just clarify what the director said? Because I legitimately just need it repeated to me. I mean, I just want to hear.
Councillor Jacobs, you can ask a question during debate. It's just
okay. Well, I'll be ready when you are, Deputy Mayor. I'm ready when you are.
Yep. Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I'm speaking regarding seconding the alternative motion, which was moved by Mayor Patrick Hall. The current issues with our security intensive scheme, I'll just point out a very simple and significant issue.
Yep.
Current scheme does not guarantee, even if a City of Canning resident does absolutely everything in accordance with the policy, which is the security intensive scheme, they still can be rejected for the grant if the grant runs out of money. And this has happened to many residents in past years. And it has clearly shows that the trend has clearly showed that more and more residents would like to use this security intensive scheme for the installation of CCTV program. So the main purpose of starting a CCTV program is to basically avoid that disappointment, or to modify the policy so that if a person applies for it, they should know either they're going to get it or not before they actually go and spend all that money. Many residents have contacted me where they said, what if we go and spend $3,000 and at the end, we just receive a letter from city that, sorry, we have run out of funds, so we cannot provide you the incentive, whether that's $100, $200, or $500. That is not a good situation to be in. So I cannot support this motion because it does not have those amendments in our current security intensive scheme. That's all. Thank you.
Apologies. With respect to this item, given that we're having a decision, and if we vote against it, we'll move to the foreshadowed amendment. Can Director McQuaid please just answer whether or not the 1.23 million, Councillor Jacobs was just asking whether or not that includes what you were referring to with regard to staff time. I just wanted to seek clarification with to help Councillor Jacobs.
Thank you, through you, Deputy Mayor. No, the 1.23 million doesn't account for the staff time. Currently, it takes us 45 minutes to process an application, and we have, I think, 0.05 FTE allocated. We have estimated, and this is outlined at paragraph 43 of the report, that we would need approximately an additional 0.75 FTE just to manage a program of this scale and size, and that is not budgeted for.
May I
Thank you, Director McQuaid. No, you can. No, sorry, you can't. You can ask a question, but you've already spoken to the item. And if it's rejected, you have the opportunity to speak to the foreshadowed. But you can ask a question. If you can phrase your comment in a question, you're more than welcome to. However, you can't speak on it again.
I'll phrase it in terms of a point of order, Deputy Mayor. The question right now, so I'm raising a point of order.
Sorry, and what's the point of order?
It's about the information provided by the city officer is regarding the foreshadow motion, and we are not debating the foreshadow motion right now. We are debating the alternative motion, and there is no figure of 1.23 million in this motion. So there shouldn't be any discussion on that.
Sorry, I accept your comments, Councillor Singh. However, the report is based on the electors meeting motion. There's a whole section from paragraph 39 to paragraph 47 on allocating 1% of the operating budget towards a CCTV program. And the question was asked by myself to provide clarification to Councillor Jacobs with respect to what would happen if we were to spend the $1.23 million and whether or not that included staff time. It was just seeking the clarification. So Councillor Jacobs, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Look, I've just got a question and then I'll probably get on to speaking for or against. We've got basically the motion that in front of us saying that does not support the motion to implement 1%. And then I believe Councillor Singh's got a foreshadowed motion to support the 1.23 million. Is that pretty much the essence of what it is?
That's the 1%. Yep, that's correct. And he has foreshadowed.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, if I was to make arguments, is it the time now that I can make an argument for or against?
So you can speak for the adjourned motion was on the screen earlier.
Yeah.
You can speak against the adjourned motion.
Yeah, I plan to speak against it.
You're going to speak against the adjourned motion?
I'm going to speak again. Well, hang on. Are we speaking to Councillor Singh's motion at the moment, or?
Sorry, Governance, are you able to put the adjourned motion on the screen just for clarity?
Excuse me, Deputy Mayor, doesn't this need a seconder before we carry on?
No, Councillor Spencer Teo. The foreshadowed doesn't need a seconder. The foreshadowed will only come to the meeting if the substantive motion as is on the screen is lost.
Okay, sorry.
Voted against.
Thanks.
No problems.
Yes, I'm happy to speak to it.
Councillor Jacobs, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry for that. I was just getting a little bit confused and I wanted to make sure before jumping in that I was getting in the right pool. So I support the motion that we've just put up. I do not plan to support Councillor Singh's foreshadowed motion. The main reason is that although I think some people may have aspirations of politics or local government is the art of the possible, and I can't sit here and put my hand on my heart and say that I think we have $1.23 million of our ratepayers' money to spend on a funding ratepayers. I don't think it's our role to do that. So I do not support the motion to implement a standalone CCTV partnership program with the allocation of 1% of the total operating budget, because I know and I feel strongly that we do not have that money. I cannot give the money if I don't think that we have the money. I've been elected to make tough decisions and I don't support that bit. 2, instead supports the modification of the city's existing security incentive schemes by reviewing the terms and conditions, including the subsidy rates. Now, I support that because I do believe that government does have a role in encouraging residents, but within our means. And that doesn't involve $1.23 million of money that we don't have in an increasingly deteriorating global environment where money is not free anymore. Or, well, it's going to be more and more expensive, I would imagine. We're getting about 4.75%. I think originally it was about 1.5%, West Australian Treasury. And I think it's going to go up, who knows, but it's going to go up before it goes down. Resolved to defer the consideration of the adjustments to the security incentive scheme fund until the city has conducted a strategic issues briefing to consider alternative funding sources. Yes, I think that's also welcome. And look, the reason I'm reading that is I think it offered clarity of thought for myself, but also for some other councillors that may have been confused with the toings and froing a little bit earlier that we had a few minutes ago. So I support it. I think it's good because it's practical. And look, if the federal government or the state government was going to start giving us checks of $1 million or $2 million, then sure, I think it'd be a great idea. But at this stage, support the motion because I think that we're doing what we can with what we have, and we're not borrowing money that we don't have to do things that I don't think we can do anyway. Thanks. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Jacobs. Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to propose just a minor amendment. It's a minor amendment into number 2A.
What would your amendment be?
Reviewing the terms and conditions and so on, including the subsidy rates provided for all other eligible security items, but to also include, and these terms and conditions be presented to council for endorsement no later than September 2022. So it's just ask the terms and conditions to come back to council. That's all I'm asking. And that these terms and conditions be presented to council for endorsement no later than September 2022. It's just asking for it to come back to council.
I understand your argument for that it's a minor amendment, but I'm just going to ask that you move it as a normal amendment because we don't actually have the mover to provide consent to you, and the standing orders require consent from the mover and the seconder in order to provide it as a minor amendment. And granted, there's no objection. So given that we don't have the mover, we are unable to get that consent. And so I would ask that you move it as an amendment and we'll get a seconder. And it's a pretty straightforward one. So hopefully we don't need any lengthy debate, but unable to do it as a minor amendment. So are you able to move it as an amendment, Councillor Holland?
I'd like to move it as an amendment.
Do we have a seconder? Do we have a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second.
Councillor Sweeney? All right, Councillor Holland, do you just want to speak to the amendment?
Look, I'll speak quickly to it. Look, it's exactly what it says, and that these terms and conditions be presented to council, which is us.
Apologies.
For endorsement.
Sorry, Councillor Holland. Sorry, I see a few curious faces. Can I just ask governance to put the amendment on the screen just so that councillors have context while you're providing your rationale? I'd hate for it to be provided after you've finished your debate. Just one moment.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor, were you speaking? Because I didn't catch you.
Sorry, I was just requesting Councillor Holland to stop for a moment from providing his rationale until we've had the amendment on the screen, just so that councillors are aware of what Councillor Holland is talking to. So Councillor Holland, seconded Councillor Sweeney, has proposed an amendment. Sorry, Stacey's just going to correct it. One moment. Apparently we've just had a frozen screen. It would just be one moment. So unfortunately, we've got a technology issue here. Governance, their laptop has just frozen. So it's just
do you want me to read it again?
Yeah, in back to olden days. Can you please just read out your amendment? And
the amendment is to Part 2A, just to be added on to the end of Part 2A where it says security items. The amendment just says, and that these terms and conditions be presented to council for endorsement no later than September 2022. That's all it says.
So the if supported, it would be reviewing the terms and conditions, including the subsidy rates for all other eligible security items, and that these terms and conditions be presented to council for endorsement no later than September 2022.
Yep, that's all.
Any councillors have any questions? I mean, they understand that. Just want to make, I don't mean questions on the intent or anything. You just understand what.
Can I just go to the toilet, if that's all right?
You're more than welcome. I'll let
leave my camera on. I'll leave it off. Take it off.
You can turn it off. Just let us know when you're back in the room, and governance will note your departure. Does Councillor Bain, do you have any questions with respect to understanding the amendment?
Yes, just through you, Deputy Mayor, a question for Councillor Hong. Would it be best to say council's consideration rather than its endorsement?
No,
So
I-
governance is
I-
going to put it on the screen. One moment. So, sorry, Councillor Bain, just hold that question until after Councillor Holland has given his rationale, and hopefully it will answer what he's intending by his amendment. I think we're nearly here. Unfortunately, it won't share. Continue, Councillor Holland.
Yeah, I heard you, Councillor Bain. I'm not sure whether consideration would mean that it would come to a vote with council or endorsement. I think endorsement is probably a better word in this situation. Look, all I'm asking is that once the terms and conditions are reviewed and the subsidy rates and all that, that it just comes back to council for endorsement. That's all this is, nothing more further than that. So I'm not going to bore everybody's time going into a 5-minute monologue. Thank you.
Councillor Sweeney.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I'm looking at what I'm supposed to be voting here for. Is this the adjourned motion, or is this what I just saw on the screen for 5 seconds before?
Yeah, so unfortunately, Councillor Sweeney, we're having some technology issues, so governance is trying to share it, but we're just debating, and you're the seconder of Councillor Holland's amendment, which is to add further text after part 2A, that the terms and conditions be presented to council for endorsement no later than September 2022. And then following debate on this, if it succeeds, it'll form part of the adjourned substantive motion. If it doesn't, we'll go back to the normal substantive motion, but we are only debating the proposed amendment.
Okay, so the proposed amendment is only relating to part 2.
So Councillor Holland has moved the amendment relation to 2A that you have seconded, and you are now speaking as the seconder on whether you support that the terms and conditions be presented to council for endorsement no later than September 2022.
So just so that I'm clear, part 1 and part 3 are out of it at the moment.
We are only debating the amendment. We're not debating parts 1 or part 3.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Do you have anything to add as the seconder?
No, nothing further there.
Nothing to add. Does anyone wish to speak to the item? Councillor Spencer-Teo.
Sorry, I have a question, if I may. I recall Director McQuaid saying something last week at the AB that the terms and conditions were out of the remit of council. Can I just get some more clarification on that? Like, are we interfering with administration by doing this?
Director McQuaid, are you able to answer that question, please?
Thank you. Through you, Deputy Mayor. That I did indicate last week that yes, officers are of the opinion that the terms and conditions are operational in nature, and hence we would not normally refer them to council for endorsement.
Anyone wish to speak to the item? Any questions? Sorry, just waiting. I think Stacey's going to have another shot at putting it on the screen. Success. So that is what we are debating right now, the amendment proposed by Councillor Holland.
That's fine.
Yeah. Councillor Spencer-Teo, you have your hand up?
Yeah, sorry, I've just got a follow-up question to that one. Could we be potentially lining ourselves up for standards panel complaints for interfering with administration with this one? Just want some clarity before
Director
I
McQuaid,
support
are you
this
able
or
to
not.
answer that? I know it's a bit subjective.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I would have to ask governance advice. I'm not able to say whether it would open us up to a standards panel complaint, but governance could provide advice there.
Director Kane. Director Kane, are you there?
Or are we breaching the Act by if we support this amendment? I guess that's what I'm trying to clarify.
Director Bowe, I think I saw Director Bowe.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor, I believe questions coming my way, but given the time, Mother Nature had caught me out.
Well, that's timing. Councillor Spencer-Terry was just asking if council supports the amendment, whether that, following her previous question about whether it involves an administration, whether or not it opens councillors up to standards panels complaints.
Or if we are in fact breaching the Act, if we support this.
Could I ask for the context in which the council thinks there might be a breach of the regulations?
Sorry, can you ask your first question, Councillor Spencer-Terry, that you asked before?
Yeah, I was just asking Director McQuaid. She mentioned last week that the terms and conditions of such a scheme would be operational and out of the remit of council. By us supporting an amendment or putting forward a motion that insists that we involve ourselves in the terms and conditions, are we in potential of breaching the Act by doing this?
Okay, so my advice would be the terms and conditions would be an operational matter. However, in this particular case, as council would simply be receiving those terms and conditions back for a recommendation, I think that would be a reasonable position. So council's not directing what goes into the terms and conditions, it's asking for the terms and conditions to be presented back to it. So I don't think you'd be in breach of the regulations by involving yourself. Normally, the terms and conditions would be set by the administration.
Thank you, Director Kane. And
does that make sense, Deputy Mayor? No, I've got this quizzical look from Councillor Spencer-Teo.
Well, you're kind of saying yes, but no. So you're saying it's operational, but then it's not. So if we were to be presented with the terms and conditions later down the track and we want to amend those and put, add things in and take things out, then would we be in breach of the Act?
Again, to the chair, it would depend on the context of what you were seeking to do at the time. So in this particular case, the staff would present a set of terms and conditions that would apply to the operation, the subsidy, just as staff would present, say, a set of terms and conditions that might apply to a lease arrangement. It would depend then on what council was wanting to do with those. So we'd be making a recommendation to you. Now, what we're trying to do is keep council at the strategic level rather than in the operational matters. There's nothing wrong with asking for the terms and conditions to be presented back, but again, we'd encourage you not to get involved in the operational matters of how the funding is being distributed. I see Director McQuaid is there and probably itching to say something as well, Deputy Mayor.
Yep, Director McQuaid.
Thank you. Through you, Councillor Spencer-Teo, we have scheduled a strategic a workshop where we do intend to bring the terms and conditions. So the opportunity for elected members to feed into the process will happen through a workshop prior to anything that had already been part of the plan for us to do that.
So even if we didn't support this amendment tonight, we still get an opportunity to have involvement in the terms and conditions at a later date anyway.
So the current motion on the table is to request. So
I'm just talking about the actual amendment here is that it's coming back anyway to a workshop that we can.
That is correct.
Okay. All right. So it doesn't really matter if we support this or not because it's still going to be open for us to discuss later.
So it does matter, but from Director McQuaid, it's the difference about whether a report gets provided back to council or not. Is that correct?
Yes, Deputy Mayor, that is correct.
Thank you. Does anyone have any further questions? I'm seeing a lot of hands up. Councillor Sabiri has a hand up, but we're current mid-debate from Councillor Holland. Can you just, is it relation to the wording? Oh, sorry, we're not. My bad. We're looking about whether anyone else would speak to it. Councillor Sabiri.
I just wanted to put the entire motion to vote.
You can do that.
Put to vote.
So you want to move a procedural motion under 10.1 C that the motion now be put.
Please. Like half an hour ago.
Do you have a seconder? Councillor Jacobs?
Yeah, I second it. Thank you.
All right. We'll then, so this motion has no debate under 10.C2. I'll now put it to the vote about whether we now put the motion.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to clarify, are we voting for the amendment or for the motion?
No, so
clear.
Councillor Sabiri has moved a procedural motion under 10.1C that the motion now be put. That means we are voting on whether we basically end debate, and then we will then vote on the amendment. So Councillor Sabiri has moved the procedural motion. There is no debate on the procedural motion. We will now move to vote. So can you please have your voting cards ready? Can you please show your voting cards?
The procedural motion that the matter now be put has been carried unanimously with all 9 in favour.
We'll now move to vote on the amendment. That is, Councillor, has anyone spoken against it? I don't believe they have. So Councillor Holland, no need to rebut. I'll now ask for you to vote and have your voting cards ready. Can you please show me your voting cards?
Mr. Mayor, we're voting on the amendment, aren't we?
That is on the amendment. So the amendment has will now be passed.
The amendment to motion CO-00522 has been carried with all 9 in favour.
Thank you, Governance. We now move back to the substantive motion as amended. Can I ask Governance to now please put it on the screen just so that councillors are aware that we are now debating the substantive motion as amended just then by council. Whilst we wait for that, before Councillor Holland moved his amendment, Councillor Singh, were you putting your hand up for a question?
Yes, Deputy Mayor, thank you for reminding me. My question is for Director McQuaid. Director mentioned that we do not have staff for the CCTV partnership program. I would like to ask the question, as the CCTV partnership program is not detailed, we have absolutely no details how this program is going to run or what it's going to be included. Was it considered to even deliver the program digitally? I mean, we don't have the details, so the details are up for discussion by the administration. So was it considered to deliver this program digitally? Is it possible?
Director McQuaid.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you for the question, Councillor Singh. The current security incentive scheme has a staffing allocation of 0.05 FTE to administer it. People can submit their forms online. However, it still takes staff time to review each submission, to go through it, to check it against the selection criteria, which any partnership program will need to have. And we have based all the information in the report on the administering of other similar programs, which we detail in the report, and the administration of the security incentive scheme. So yes, there is a digital element to it, but that will not negate the fact that you will need a staff allocation to be able to administer the program.
Thank you, Director McQuaid. Does anyone wish to speak on the item on the substantive motion as amended?
Can we have a look at it, please, Mr.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for Governance. One moment, Councillor Sweeney. All right, thanks, Stacey. Does anyone wish to speak on the item? Look, I speak in favour of the amended substantive motion. I recognise the views put forward by the members of the community that there's real concerns out there and they'd like a program to help provide CCTV. As Councillor Jacobs mentioned in his debate, I don't think the city's in anywhere near a financial position to provide that amount of funding, nor do I think they should. We should. I've often spoken in this place about the remit of local government, the remit of state government, and the remit of federal government, and I recognise that there's a vacuum there, but that's only really been created because the federal and state governments who used to provide proceeds of crimes funding to these programs, the state government actually provides a program to seniors and senior rebates. But I think there's more that needs to be done with respect to from the state government to provide funding to these sorts of incentive schemes. I commend the Mayor for going out and speaking with members of Parliament and advocate for it. A number of years ago, I wouldn't have said I would support such a security incentive scheme because as we've had many discussions that local government should provide certain services, but we have so much we need to do in the City of Canning. And I think that any dollar increase should be really considered and in terms of rates, and that they should be invested into areas that we are responsible for. But I recognise that we have a security incentive scheme now, and it's an opportunity to provide a partnership with the state government. And I really urge the state government to come to this party and provide funding because there's a real need in the Southeast Corridor to help members of the community have CCTV. But the data provided with the strategic community plan, I said on that night when we endorsed it that we have the data, but just because there's issues within the community is not necessarily our role to fill them. We need to do all we can. We can advocate, we can secure funding. I know a number of councillors candidates have previously fought for action on aircraft noise. Are we proposing a noise insulation scheme in City of Canning funded by ratepayers? No, we're not. We are expecting the federal government to take action to reduce aircraft noise for our residents. We need to advocate for that to happen. I really believe that we need to advocate in many areas, but it's not our role. We don't have the funding to be delivering what we are responsible for as a local government, but also delivering what other entities or other tiers of government should be providing. And so I think what we do is fantastic. And wish we could do more. And I think if we can get a partnership as is proposed through this recommendation and as the advocacy of the city with members of Parliament, and hopefully that we can secure some state government funding, not just for the City of Canning, but for the Southeast Corridor, and that partnerships can be provided to help the community deal with this sort of antisocial behaviour. And there's lots, it's a complex situation and we need to do what we can, but we can't, it shouldn't be up to ratepayers to be funding it in totality. So I support this officer recommendation and look forward to seeing the terms and conditions be discussed and alternative funding mechanisms. And I hope to have that the Mayor and CEO can provide news in the future in that regard. Anyone else wish to speak on the item? All right, so the Mayor who moved the motion is unavailable, so he is unable to rebut. So I will now put it to the vote. Can you please have your voting cards ready? And I just want to reiterate, given that there's a foreshadow that this one doesn't support the 1% allocation as part one, and that if it's rejected, we'll then go to the foreshadow. So can you have your voting cards ready? And please show me your voting cards.
The substantive motion is amended for CO-00522 has been carried with 8 in favour and 1 against, with Councillor Singh voting against the motion.
Thank you, Karen. Moving on.
Excuse me for a moment, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Holland.
Just excuse me for a moment.
Oh, yep. Councillor Holland is leaving the room. Governance, can you please note that? All right, we move on to 14 motions of which previous notice has been given. A notice of motion has been received from Councillor Spencer Teo, which can be seen on the screen. The recommendation is on page 220 of the agenda. The item comes under the Director of Canning Corporate and Commercial, Director Kane's purview. Thanks, Stacey. Thank you. Can I have a mover? Councillor Spencer Teo. Can I please have a seconder? I'm happy to move it from the chair. Councillor Spencer Teo, do you wish to speak to the item?
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Mayor. I'll be as brief as I can, but in my time on council, I've noticed a real lack of consistency when it comes to the application of policy BR01 to our community and commercial lease holdings. We also have 3 policies that are all intertwined, but were all created and reviewed at different times. In support of this notice of motion, administration have informed us that greater policy direction would have assisted officers in providing consistent recommendations in the past. So we know we've got 95 different leases and not every lease is a one size fits all. But what I feel is we need some greater consistencies on the terms of the leases and who gets charged what. If you're a leaseholder with unlimited revenue generating capabilities, should you be treated the same as a group who has limited or restricted income sources? More concerning are the loopholes that I believe need to be addressed with these policies. You may not know it, but some of our leases where a community group is either on a peppercorn rental or a standard community lease, they can sublet portions of the facility to other groups. Whether these groups are not-for-profit or profit entities, it could be either. But through these subleasing agreements, what's happening is the tens of thousands of dollars of rental income is being diverted from the city and its ratepayers, and it's allowing tenants to profit from our very generous lease fees and terms. Some are balanced out by the lessees having to maintain the building, and we're released of our obligations there, but some aren't. So some ratepayers fund the maintenance and upkeep, sometimes even the cleaning of the premises, while tenants' bank accounts get larger and larger every financial year. So councillors, do you think that we should be getting these funds? I certainly do. I think that it should be coming to us so that we can reinvest into delivering services to our ratepayers. All this notice of motion is doing is asking for a review. We need some clarity over who gets charged what and who does and who doesn't get a discount, even if a discount applies. And if there's money to be made, whose bank account does that go into? This is not making any decisions to increase or decrease anyone's rent. It's simply asking staff to review the policies, identify and work to close some of these gaps and to get some kind of alignment and put forward recommendations on how to tidy up all these policies and bundle them together. We'll have a workshop where all our views on the table, and we can collaboratively work on setting the policy suite into the future. So again, please support this in tidying up these policies to our leases so that we can be more fair and consistent across the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer Teo. Look, as a seconder, I support the notice of motion. It's been I believe it's been an issue for quite some time. I won't pretend it's an easy area for staff to navigate. As when we first discussed BR01 a number of years ago, I was concerned that often groups are apples and pears. There's often extenuating circumstances why certain things should be taken into consideration. So it's an area that's difficult, and sometimes consistency or comparing groups can be a little bit difficult, but there needs to be more consistency. If I may say that, there's staff have supported the notice of motion because they believe that it's right for a review. The 3 policy documents need to be talking with one another, and we need to try to work out how we can provide more consistency, how we can provide more direction to staff, so that a few of the issues that have been discussed, especially in the last 12 to 18 months, can be clarified. That whilst the original intention of BR01 was to provide that consistency and remove some of those historical, I just note that Councillor Holland has returned, sorry, I lost my train of thought, that the original intention of BR01 was to remove some of those legacy, I guess, terms and conditions that some groups have had just because they've always had it, and to provide that consistency. For whatever reason, sometimes it doesn't appear to council that we're comparing groups or not-for-profits, or there seems to be issues, and we just need to clarify and provide that direction that's required. Obviously, in this notice of motion, we're not actually stipulating too much of what we want with respect to what's in the policy document. What we want is a review. We want to come together and discuss it, so councillors through a workshop, but also so that we can provide that direction that staff have agreed is required. So I would hope that councillors support this. If I don't believe there should be any reason for concerns, because we're just asking for a workshop and a review, but I'll open it up to anyone that may wish to speak on the item or ask any questions. Wonderful. All right, with no rebut needed, Councillor Spencer, I'll put this to the vote. Can you please have your voting cards ready? Can you please raise your voting cards?
Thank you. Motion nom-006-22 has been carried unanimously with all 9 in favour.
Thank you, Governance. We now move on to nom 007, a notice of motion. Sorry, Councillor Sweeney, your microphone's on. Thank you. A notice of motion has been received from Councillor Spencer Teo, which can now be seen on the screen. The recommendation is on page 223 of the agenda. Director Canning Environment Warren Bowes, the relevant director. Nom 007, trial translocation of Western grey kangaroos from the Canning Vale Waste Transfer Station. You've seen the notice of motion. Can I please have a mover? Councillor Spencer Teo has proposed the notice of motion. Can I have a seconder, please? I'll move from Councillor Holland. Councillor Spencer Teo.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So if I can start by casting our minds back to December, when this council unanimously supported the allocation of $250,000 from the compensation of Metronet's compulsory acquisition of our land where our kangaroos used to graze. These funds were kept aside to protect the kangaroos, not manage them, not cull them, not further landlock them, but protect them. A report was commissioned mid last year, which provided a couple of recommendations, all of which the cost of implementing would require ratepayers' funds to purchase and install fencing, buy ammunition, and pay a licensed shooter to cover the costs to remove the kangaroo carcasses. Since Metronet put up their fences, kangaroos have lost their lives due to injuries sustained by trying to jump the fence. See, this is the thing. There's a misconception that fencing keeps kangaroos safe and away from danger. That's not true. Kangaroos don't understand why one day they can access the land they've been grazing on for many years and the next day there's a fence in their way. As a direct result of Metronet's land clearing, our ratepayers paid $17,000 for a report that recommends we manage the kangaroo population by the following means. Number 1, culling. Let me remind you that the documented humane way of culling an adult kangaroo is a single bullet to the head. If the kangaroo is lucky, that the shooter is a good shot. Then after watching its mum and dad be fatally shot, a juvenile or joey gets grabbed and receives no other way to describe it but a skull bashing, usually from the butt of a rifle, a rock, or a hammer. That, my friends, is the humane way of killing a kangaroo. The other options were exclusion fencing and or removing access to food and water. This will eventually result in starvation or further competition for food with the other wildlife on this site. That's if the kangaroos don't kill themselves trying to jump the fence to access the food and water. Either way, the end result of these options is death. The only variable is how long and how painful that death will be. So if we don't agree with these recommendations, what options are there? Well, we could do nothing, but that's exactly what's led us to the point of having an unknown number of kangaroos breeding and overgrazing, which is not only impacting them, but it's also impacting the other wildlife on this site. What this NOM proposes to do is include translocation as an option to put saving the lives of the kangaroos on the table. Translocations are and can be successful. Many have taken place over several years involving hundreds of kangaroos, but only one has been documented. Sadly, that one wasn't successful. Now, it wasn't because the kangaroos can't or shouldn't be translocated. It was because of the methodology, interference, and science behind this one particular case. Now, I can sit here all night and tell you what went wrong with that translocation. I know I've spoken to the guys who carried it out, and I've spoken to officers from DBCA who were there. But I'd rather sit here and tell you what we, if given the opportunity, would do differently. First and foremost, we've got access to not just a macropod specialist vet, but a Western grey kangaroo specialist vet. Now, Dr. Rogers has mastered the science behind the sedation of Western grey kangaroos. No translocation in WA has ever had anyone like her overseeing the health and welfare of animals being moved. Secondly, we won't be herding large mobs on quad bikes or trying to relocate mass numbers in a very short period of time. You might be wondering why other translocations haven't been documented. Well, this can actually be more time consuming and expensive than the actual translocation itself. Until recently, massive collars have been used to track translocated kangaroos. These themselves can stress kangaroos to death. They're huge, heavy, and invasive, and they only last for short periods of time. We're not going to be using collars. Then there's the cost of data collection and reporting. How long do we expect someone to document the kangaroos? A month, a year, 10 years, or until each kangaroo eventually dies? It's not always practical, especially when you're dealing with large numbers and limited budgets. Now, we have access to the latest technology when it comes to the data collection and tracking. No local government or private developer in WA has ever willingly taken on this initiative where kangaroos are in conflict with humans. This is an opportunity for Canning to be the leader in humane and effective fauna management on its land holdings while focusing on the maximisation of lives affected, wildlife's lives affected. 300 plus kangaroos cannot be sustained on this site. We cannot continue to sit back and do nothing. Breeding season's here right now. Plus, councillors, we're going to need this information to make informed decisions in the future. In closing, I'd like to thank staff for their support with this notice of motion. If I had have read the CSIRO report in conjunction with the recommendation and not spoken to places like WA Wildlife and DBCA, I would have also agreed that perhaps translocation wasn't an option. So thank you to Director Boney's team for speaking with DBCA and Wildlife and for their support. I beg you, councillors, please give these kangaroos a go and let's trial this translocation.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer. Teo, have you got a question, Councillor Jacobs?
I'm just trying to see if we can do a procedural motion to put this to the vote. I think this may enjoy the support of most councillors.
I don't believe you can until the seconder has spoken, Councillor Jacobs. We're just confirming.
I'll be the seconder and then do that.
No, sorry, Councillor Holland is the seconder. So, Councillor Holland, are you just able to speak if you wish on to second the motion?
Yes, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I've got quite a long monologue I want to go through. Not really. I think this, I'll be very, very quick, Councillor Jacobs. I agree with you. Let's put this to the vote very quickly. I think this is to do a trial, and I think a trial is warranted in this instance. So we've got all the facts and figures with us in front of us. It's just to do a trial. I think the funding that we're allocating is not a huge amount. It's just to do a trial to try and see what is going to be the best thing we can do for these animals. I'm not into culling them either. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that at the moment. And I'm quite happy if we put a motion to go ahead and go to the vote, if that's what we want to do.
Councillor Jacobs, you want to move that motion?
Oh, yes, thanks, Deputy Mayor. As Councillor Holland so eloquently put, that we put a procedural motion to put this to the vote. I think it enjoys the support of council.
So Councillor Jacobs would like to move a procedural motion under 10.1C that the motion now be put. As previously, there's no debate on this matter. We will now just vote on whether we are now putting the motion. We're not actually voting on the notice of motion as put by Councillor Spencer Teo. All those councillors...
It has to have a seconder, doesn't it?
Oh, sorry, you're correct. Can I have a seconder? No, I don't believe you
second
can, Councillor Holland, because you've spoken on the motion. Is there a Councillor Sabiri who would like to second the motion?
Can I ask a question, please?
No, sorry, there's no debate. It's the procedural motion's been put. There's no discussion. Sorry, Councillor Sweeney, I understand, but that's the rules of the standing.
I was just going to ask a question. That was it.
There is no questions. The motion has been put. There's no discussion whatsoever. There's no questions permissible.
I can't even hear what you're saying. So
there is no questions permissible.
Can something go up on the screen? Is there something that can go up on the screen so I can see it? Because I'm only getting bits and pieces of the volume.
So we've got a seconder is Councillor Sabiri.
Mr Deputy Mayor, we've had questions on procedural motions before, just questions.
When there's actual, when the mover is speaking on the motion, but this is now put, it's instant. We have a mover and a seconder. There's no questions permissible. There's no debate. We're now just putting the motion.
Okay, I'm happy with that as long as we keep to that for all time now.
Yep. So the procedural motion moved by Councillor Jacobs and seconded by Councillor Sabiri is that the motion be put. So that's on the screen.
So that we're clear then, Deputy Mayor, there's no, once this gets put through, there is no debate on the subject. Is that what we're saying?
That's correct. Now, the motion, the procedural motion is to be put, and that will then put us to a vote on the notice of motion. All those in, can you please put your voting cards up on the screen?
So then at
Sorry,
the notice
Councillor
of motion,
Sweeney.
I just want some clarification.
So the motion, the procedural motion is to be put so that will go to the vote. If council votes to agree with the procedural motion, we will then vote on the notice of motion. So
Right.
can you please show me your voting cards?
Procedural motion that the matter be now put has been carried with 7 in favour and 2 against, being Councillor Sweeney and Holland voting against.
We'll then move to voting on the notice of motion. Councillor Spencer Chair, there's nothing to rebut, so we'll move to voting.
Hang on a minute, Mr. Deputy Mayor, can I just ask you a question, please?
You may ask a question now.
Yeah, is that okay? It's now appropriate time? Because I would like
you can
to
ask a question now. Yes.
So well, there's no opportunity for any other councillor right now to speak either for or against this.
No,
Has that just been eliminated, has it?
Councillor Jacobs and Councillor Sabiri moved and seconded a procedural motion to put the item, which means that debate is now stopped. We now move to the end of the motion, which would be rebuttal, but nobody spoke against it. Therefore, we're now voting on the notice of motion.
Well, okay. Well, I was going to speak against it. So I thought council, I couldn't speak against it.
It was a council decision to put the motion, and we have followed that procedural motion. Council decided to end debate. So we'll now go to voting on the notice of motion. Can you please prepare your voting cards? Can you please show me your voting cards?
I don't even know what we're fucking voting for.
Councillor Sweeney, don't swear in a live council meeting. It's not acceptable. Can you please turn your camera, your microphone off?
So motion nom -007-22 has been carried, 8 in favour, with Councillor Sweeney voting against the motion.
Thank you, Council, and thank you, Governance. I will now move on to point 15, urgent business. There is none. Point 16, confidential matters. There are none. 17, closure. There being no further business, I now declare the meeting closed at 9:29 p.m. I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance, and especially staff and governance for coming in, and have a good night. Thank you.